more of it, and it wants to come right through us. That's Friday. Watch the purple. This is Saturday. Now it's coming through the northern part of South Dakota. Here is Super Bowl Sunday. Now we got cold air. As I mentioned, some parts of northeastern South Dakota might struggle to get above 0 on Super Bowl Sunday. And here's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right on through Valentine's Day weekend and beyond. That cold air is going to be over us, and you can see it's going to envelop much of the northern part of the United States by starting next Friday. So we're going to be talking about this cold air for quite a while. Otherwise, for tonight, with fog lows in the 20s. During the day tomorrow, mostly cloudy skies, maybe a few peaks of sun during the afternoon. Tomorrow night, front comes through
of the president's time. But the reality remains the same. The two sides are just extremely divergent on the policy front right now. And the Biden administration, the president on down, has made clear they prefer to go big rather than go small and perhaps reach a bipartisan deal with Republicans that have put $618 billion on the table. So the reality right now, both here at the White House and in Capitol Hill, is Democrats, President Biden on down, are pushing forward on $1.9 trillion. If Republicans want to negotiate on certain pieces of that, they are certainly open to that. But the idea of coming down significantly or removing key pieces of that proposal right now seems very off the table, Wolf.
All right, Phil, thank you very much. Phil Mattingly at the White House. Let's stay at the White House. The White House Communications Director, Kate Bedingfield, is joining us right now. Kate, thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations on your new job. Let's talk about what we just heard from Phil. Despite President Biden's long meeting, more than 2 hours last night with these 10 Senate Republicans on this emergency COVID relief plan, is it now full steam ahead, passing this legislation with a 50-vote threshold without requiring any Republican votes?
Well, we can still do this with bipartisan support. I think that's a really important thing for people to understand. Just because a bill moves forward in reconciliation, which is what that process is called, doesn't mean that Republicans can't vote for it. If you look at, for example, the Children's Health Insurance Program, the CHIP program, that's a program that passed with overwhelming bipartisan support on a reconciliation bill. So President Biden's hope is that we are still going to get Republican support for this package. What he is unwilling to do, though, is to slow the process down or to put forward a package that he doesn't believe meets the needs of the moment or the needs of this crisis. He's put forward a package that includes $1,400 checks to ensure that people like a teacher making $60,000 a year get some of this direct relief. He's put forward a plan that includes billions in funding for vaccinations to ensure that we're getting shots in American arms. And he's put forward a plan that includes money to help small businesses. This was a point of consensus in the meeting.
Write down who is...
Sure, to stay informed with the first...
Gracefully, this is why we are losing our country.
I think I adequately spoke out about how I feel.
McConnell's also inserting himself in calls from within the party to oust Representative Liz Cheney from her leadership post after she voted to impeach President Trump last month. Ahead of her sit-down with McCarthy deciding her leadership fate, McConnell endorsed Cheney, writing, "Liz Cheney is a leader with deep convictions and the courage to act on them."
Now, Democrats are trying to force McCarthy's hand and threatening to strip Greene of her committee assignments if McCarthy won't do it himself. If he won't, they will make hay of it in the midterms. Brett.
Jackie Heinrich live on Capitol Hill. Jackie, thank you. Up next, masks are now mandatory on public transportation. We'll bring you that story. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 32 in Chicago, where the stalemate between the city and teachers continues tonight. Public school systems announcing remote learning will continue through Wednesday, and teachers will not be locked out of the system, calling it a gesture of good faith toward educators. The head of the teachers union called it an encouraging step. This is a live look at Philadelphia from Fox 29. Remember what today is? The big story there. 6 more weeks of winter expected, at least according to Punxsutawney Phil. The famous groundhog saw his shadow on a snowy Gobbler's Hill with no crowd in attendance due to coronavirus restrictions. Thousands watched the live stream of the event. Bill Murray apparently was not in attendance. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We will be right back.
Closed doors with a very controversial brand new freshman Congresswoman, Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is supposed to happen soon, as early as tonight. The Republican Party has a problem here. Pressure to punish or sanction her in some way for what we're about to show you, as well as there are wider calls to remove her from committees, like the Education and Budget committees, or even more, some talk about what else could be done when you have a known promoter of really vile conspiracy theories, some of them dangerous. She suggested that school shootings and the Parkland shooting were just staged, which is widely viewed as not only false, but highly disrespectful to the many lives lost. There are other inflammatory and conspiratorial comments as well.
The resource officer at Parkland had done his job, then Nicholas Cruz wouldn't have killed anybody in your high school.
There is an Islamic invasion into our government offices right now.
We had witnessed 9/11, right? We had witnessed 9/11, the terrorist attack. It's odd, there's never any evidence shown for a plane in the Pentagon. But anyways, I'm not going to dive into the 9/11 conspiracy.
Now, the pressure on Republican leader McCarthy has been ratcheting up, including from within the Republican Party. Take Mitch McConnell, who's rebuking her now. He didn't name the Congresswoman, but he denounced QAnon conspiracies as, quote, loony lies. Senator McConnell says this is a cancer for the Republican Party and our country. McConnell also, in a sign of what is going on between different Republican leaders, is supporting Liz Cheney, who was one of the only members of Republican leadership who formally voted to impeach Donald Trump. He notes that she's still a leader with deep convictions and the courage to act on them. It's tension within the Republican Party. It relates to Trump and Trumpism, but it goes well beyond. Some are supporting Taylor.
Wounded, trying to serve a warrant in a child pornography case. Tonight, the first calls for help and the latest details. Singularly responsible, the Democrats' case against former President Trump, accusing him of setting off rioters like a loaded cannon. And Trump's legal team responds, saying the Senate can't try an ex-president. Plus,
and then I just start to hear these yells of, where is she?
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's revelation. Vaccinated at your local pharmacy? The new White House plan tonight to increase the number of shots to Americans. Reversing Trump's hardline immigration policies. President Biden aims to reunite families separated at the border. Women and the pandemic. In our series, we look at the economic toll, a she session, why more women are leaving the workforce than men. Putin, the poisoner. Protests tonight as opposition leader Alexei Navalny lashes out at the Russian president after he's sentenced to prison. Leaving in his prime, the surprise announcement about Amazon's founder, Jeff Bezos. And plot twist, how this group of women in a small town book club banded together to vaccinate their community.
This is the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell, reporting from the nation's capital.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. There are several major headlines as we come on the air tonight, including former President Trump laying out his defense strategy for the first time ahead of next week's Senate impeachment trial. We're going to have more on that in just a moment, but we want to begin with that breaking news on that bloody shootout in a quiet neighborhood north of Miami. Tonight, 2 veteran FBI agents are dead, and 3 others have been shot after they were ambushed outside of an apartment complex in Sunrise, Florida. The shooter, who was being investigated on child pornography charges, reportedly used a doorbell video camera to watch the agents approach his home before blasting gunfire through his unopened front door. Well, tonight, the shooter is dead after a standoff that shut down traffic and locked down parts of the city, and the entire FBI is reeling.
Scene, police, SWAT team, sheriff's departments, the wounded rushed for medical care. The 2 fallen agents had years of experience fighting crimes against children. A procession of law enforcement, motorcycles and SUVs escorting the ambulance with one of the fallen agents, and a line of officers saluting as the flag-draped gurney is carried into the medical examiner's office. FBI Director Christopher Wray issuing a statement saying FBI agents put themselves in harm's way every day. And tonight, President Biden saying just a short time ago that his heart aches for the families. ABC's Victor Kendall leading us off from Florida tonight.
Tonight, in one of the deadliest shootings in FBI history, 2 agents killed and another 3 injured. The FBI now mourning the loss of Special Agents Daniel Alvin and Laura Schwarzenberger.
Do not fire towards the front porch. We're going to be moving up.
According to authorities, federal agents were serving a search warrant early this morning in Sunrise, Florida. They knocked to announce their presence, and when there was no answer, reached the door, immediately coming under rifle fire.
We're inside the development, and we're still working our way up. We're going to extract the down officers.
Authorities say the suspected gunman was being looked into as part of a child pornography investigation. SWAT teams rushing to the scene, an armored vehicle crashing through those gates, a pool of blood in the corner of the screen. This man saying the shots woke him up.
At least 20 rounds, continuous. Bam, 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 bam.
And that woke you up this morning?
First thing this morning, 5:30.
Officials say the suspect died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. One of the deceased agents honored with a solemn procession. Officials saluting the flag-draped gurney.
They were valuable members of the FBI and will forever be heroes.
President Biden tonight sending his condolences.
Put their lives on the line, and it's a hell of a price to pay.
Let's get right to Victor Oquendo. He's live in Florida tonight. And Victor, I know authorities say this only underscores the dangers that these FBI agents face every day when executing these search warrants.
David, our sources tell us that there is no such thing as executing a safe warrant, that when you enter a home, a hallway can create a bottleneck. Law enforcement describes that as a fatal tunnel. The FBI is now conducting an internal investigation to see if there was a rush to stop this ongoing abuse of children. David?
All right, Victor Oquendo leading us off tonight. Victor, thank you. We're going to turn now to the deadly nor'easter. At least 3 dead, including a woman just 67 with Alzheimer's, who authorities say had wandered out into the storm. Tonight, there was yet another system set to move right across the country again, a very similar path. And still the effects of this storm, damaging waves pounding the coast of Situate, Massachusetts there. More than a foot of snow further inland, and in some places nearly 3 feet of snow. The next storm's already brewing. Rob Marciano from the storm zone again tonight.
Tonight, that powerful and record-breaking nor'easter lashing coastal New England with howling wind and crashing waves. After bringing an entire...
To give us opportunities for our kids to learn civil discourse and learn to have debate about important issues without it resorting into what we've seen on so many city streets this year.
Do you think it's correct, proper, fair, whatever word you want to use, for many to say that the former president incited what happened? Do you feel that way?
You know, many times I've said that I didn't necessarily like the way that he talked. There was so many elements there, and I wasn't there that day, that I think that the investigations will continue to go on and we'll learn more.
And coming up next hour on Dakota News Now at 6 o'clock on KSFY, more of our interview this afternoon with Governor Noem. We asked her if her movement to overturn the recreational marijuana vote here in South Dakota is an effort to subvert the will of the people. What she says about that coming up next half hour. For now, reporting live from the Pier Newsroom, Brian Allen, Dakota News Now.
Brian, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. That's just part of our conversation with the governor today. We will post our entire interview on our website, dakotanewsnow.com. Continuing coverage out of Mitchell, where one of the men charged in a fatal shooting has pleaded not guilty. That shooting happening last month just south of the Corn Palace. Jose Morales Acevedo pleaded not guilty to several charges today, including first-degree murder. The other man, Luis Perez Melendez, is scheduled to be in court on Thursday. Authorities say the 2 men shot and killed the victim while they were trying to steal a handgun. We've learned today that a woman has also been charged in connection with the shooting. Meanwhile, the investigation continues in Garrettson, where 2 people were taken to the hospital with gunshot wounds. Authorities were called out to the area of 3rd and Eastern at around 5 o'clock this morning for a report of gunshots. The Minnehaha County Sheriff's Office did not release many details during this morning's briefing, but did say there is no danger to the public. They say all the people involved know each other and they believe everyone is accounted for. There are no charges at this time. With the Department of Health reporting another drop in active cases today, that number now sitting at 2,600, and it comes as health officials report nearly 120 new cases. The latest report also includes 1 new death, while hospitalizations remain at around 130. Around the region, Minnesota is ramping up its vaccination rollout. Governor Tim Walz says that the number of vaccinations being administered per day this week is twice the shots given each day last week. He says the increase follows a directive to meet a goal that providers should administer 90% of the vaccine supply that they receive within 72 hours and the rest within 1 week's time. Still ahead here at 5:30, a popular Sioux Falls event is canceling its plans for the second straight year. The latest on the St. Patrick's Day Parade coming up next. Hey, Tyler.
Hey there, Sam. We're tracking some snowfall for parts of the area tomorrow night.
We recommend double masks.
When people tell me or ask me, should I be wearing 2 masks, I say, you know, if it makes you feel better to do 2 masks, the chances are you're going to get an enhanced protection, so why not go ahead and do it?
Tonight, the Biden administration expanded access to vaccines by giving 1 million doses to more than 6,000 pharmacies starting next week, with more on the way. Walmarts in Chicago began vaccinating customers today. And in Texas, health officials are hoping to fast-track shots by turning Texas Motor Speedway into a massive vaccination site. For 3 days, cars will cram 16 lanes in the racetrack's parking lot, where officials plan to administer 1,000 shots an hour, 10,000 shots a day.
But how important is this region-wise?
This is really part of the race to herd immunity. Here, the goal is needles and arms.
The clinic will open back up for 2 more days this week, and already more than 160,000 people are on a waiting list just to get vaccinated here. Health officials say if they get another large shipment of doses, they'll open the clinic back up again. Nora?
Omar there at the Texas Motor Speedway. Thank you. And we're going to turn now to that monster cross-country storm that has buried the southeast. Several towns in northern New Jersey got slammed with more than 30 inches of snow, coming within an inch of records going back more than a century. CBS's Mola Lenghi shows us the cleanup.
We're going to turn now to former President Trump's impeachment trial set to begin 1 week from today, and tonight how the former president's lawyers now plan to defend him. As House Democrats, the House managers will argue the former president was, quote, singularly responsible for the deadly Capitol siege. Rachel Scott on Capitol Hill again tonight.
Tonight, in a sweeping 80-page brief, House Democrats laying out their case against Donald Trump, declaring him singularly responsible for the Capitol insurrection, calling it a betrayal of historic proportions. Democrats charged the former president whipped up a mob of supporters into a frenzy, pointing to these words.
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong.
House prosecutors citing these videos obtained by Just Security as evidence of just how the crowd responded in real time to the president's words.
Take the Capitol! Take the Capitol right now!
Democrats argue Trump spent months laying the groundwork for the insurrection, flagging this moment from the first debate.
Stand back and stand by.
And highlighting Trump's phone call, pressuring Georgia's Secretary of State to find enough votes to help him win.
So what are we going to do here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes. Fellas, I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
Tonight, Trump's lawyers responding, saying the former president did nothing wrong, claiming when he told this to his supporters,
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
That he was talking about the need to fight for election security in general. They say the First Amendment entitles Trump to express his belief that the election results were suspect, claiming there is insufficient evidence to prove him wrong. That is not true. There have been multiple audits and recounts, and judges rejected more than 60 lawsuits from the president and his allies. Ultimately, Trump's lawyers insist the trial is unconstitutional since Trump is no longer in office. Most constitutional scholars disagree, and Democrats today argue if provoking an insurrectionary riot against a joint session of Congress after losing an election is not an impeachable offense, it's hard to imagine what would be.
This all begins 1 week from today, and Rachel, we know with Republicans in the Senate and their vote in recent days, this impeachment trial, in their words, is unconstitutional. That Democrats will now argue that's not the case because they say that would essentially mean a president would not be held accountable for their actions in their final weeks of office.
That's exactly right, David. And tonight, those House impeachment managers say there can be no January exception when it comes to impeachment, that a president must answer for his conduct from his first day in office through his last. David?
All right, Rachel Scott, our congressional correspondent tonight. Rachel, thank you. Meantime, President Biden taking new executive action tonight, this time rolling back Trump administration immigration policies. The president taking aim at the Trump administration's family separation policy. President Biden now creating a task force to reunite migrant children with their parents. So let's bring in senior White House correspondent Mary Bruce tonight at the White House, because Mary, the Biden administration today seemed to acknowledge that they don't even know how many children are still separated from their parents.
David, they don't, and this is a massive task. The Biden administration admits they are starting at square one here, just trying to figure out how many children are still separated from their families and where their parents may be. Now, some advocates are critical of the president, saying he's not doing enough here, but Biden says by creating this task force, he's just taking the first step to try and undo what he calls the, quote, moral and national shame caused by the previous administration. David?
All right, Mary Bruce with late reporting from the White House tonight. Mary, thank you. We turn to that news about Amazon tonight, one of the most powerful companies in the world. We've learned that Amazon founder and CEO Jeff Bezos will step down. So what's next and what's behind the move? Here's our chief business and economics correspondent, Rebecca Jarvis, tonight.
Tonight, Jeff Bezos, founder of one of the most powerful companies in the world, is stepping down. The man who started Amazon in 1994, building it from an online bookstore into a global giant worth more than $1.6 trillion, changing the way we shop, stream, and get our deliveries, writing in a letter to employees that 27 years ago, when Amazon was just an idea without a name, the question I was asked most frequently at the time was, what's the internet?
And I picked books as the first best product I saw online.
The idea for Amazon has made Bezos one of the wealthiest people on the planet, worth an estimated $196.4 billion. There are now more than 150 million Prime members and more than 1 million Amazon employees, 400,000 who joined the company just last year in the pandemic as business boomed. Competition from the retail giant squeezing small brick-and-mortar businesses for years. Bezos now passing the baton to longtime Amazon employee Andy Jassy, known for building Amazon Web Services.
David, Bezos says he's making this move to spend more time on things like philanthropy, space travel, and the Washington Post, and he will stay on with the company as executive chair. David?
All right, Rebecca Jarvis live in New York for us. Rebecca, thank you. And overseas tonight, Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who survived being poisoned, has now been sentenced to more than 2 years in prison. Tonight, the U.S. calling for his immediate and unconditional release. Here's our senior foreign correspondent, Ian Pannell, tonight.
Tonight, Russia's top opposition leader sentenced to more than 2.5 years in prison. Alexei Navalny, joking at times but defiant throughout, drawing a heart on his cage to his wife Yulia before being led away. He was sentenced today for breaching probation on an embezzlement case dismissed as unlawful by the European Court of Human Rights. The reason he failed to meet probation officers in person as he was supposed to, because he was fighting for his life in a German hospital after being poisoned, but the court dismissed that. Navalny fell ill in a flight from Siberia to Moscow last August. He was rushed to Germany under high security, where it was found he'd been poisoned with the deadly nerve agent Novichok. But after he recovered and returned to Russia, he was arrested, igniting nationwide protests and the arrests of thousands in recent weeks.
Despite condemning this verdict, the challenge for President Biden is how else to pressure Russia other than imposing more sanctions. And this isn't over yet. Navalny supporters say they're going to carry on protesting. David?
Quite a few days ahead of us, Ian Pannell, thank you. When we come back, the image...
Tomorrow night we'll begin to see this rain-snow mix.
It's been ranked #1 by J.D. Power 9 times.
People remember where they were when they saw the news or saw Floyd's friends and family reacting in that heartbreaking public grieving. And that also includes John Bon Jovi, whose 2020 album includes a searing song about Floyd's killing called American Reckoning. And he says that moment with Jackson that you just saw a piece of was actually a turning point for John Bon Jovi, for him to write this song. And he talks about this in our new interview. So we'll start there. Here's a bit of that exchange airing right now for the first time. I just want to read from American Reckoning and hear from you about what you're telling us. You say, damn those 8 long minutes, lying face down in cuffs on the ground. Bystanders pleaded for mercy as one cop shoved a kid in the crowd. When did a judge and jury become a badge and a knee? Tell us about that song.
You know, Ari, I had to take a position on this record. I wanted it to be that I were in your shoes or anyone else who is reporting news. So in essence, I said to myself, I am a witness to history. And much like anyone else who had the opportunity to watch the television or read the newspaper, we were all witness to history. And in the case of the death of George Floyd, there I was, a captive audience, watching the television, and was so taken by the moment and the graphic nature of the moment, both visually and the audio recordings. And the best way for me to express what I saw was through the songs. And American Reckoning took shape.
It's really powerful. You're recounting it as something that so many people shared in America and really around the world. How soon from seeing it, as we all did you know you were going to do a song?
I watched as his friend, the basketball player, was recounting to Craig Melvin on the Today Show that in his last words he was calling for his mom, and my eyes just welled up with tears. And it was that morning I just turned around. So this is a day or two later, and I went to my office and closed the door, and I just started writing. You know, when you're a songwriter, you could rhyme moon, June, and spoon. You can have light, easy moments about nothing and make people happy and make them dance. When you're a witness to history and you're talking about something that happened in the day and age in which you're living, you better get it right. But it is America's reckoning. You know, this time, the Black Lives Matter movement has really taken a hold around the globe. You saw the reaction in the streets worldwide.
John Bon Jovi has tackled many topics as a singer-songwriter, from rock and roll party tracks to those working class anthems that so many people love and remember. He's deeply involved in news and civic life and philanthropy. The Rock and Roll Hall of Famer also performed at Joe Biden's inauguration, singing the Beatles song, Here Comes the Sun. And in this brand new interview, we also touched on some of his new lyrics that actually dig into the problems of Russian election interference and online bots that try to undercut our democracy.
Quote, pushing all this through, but it makes these achievements very brittle, and I don't think it helps. And the president's problem, sometimes it's harder when you have the kind of slight majority that the Democrats have now, because you're always vulnerable to defections, as the Republicans learned with John McCain in health care. And so it's not just Joe Manchin. Every Democrat in the Senate is the 50th vote. And that's a problem. As Mara, to slightly re-say what Mara said, I mean, it's hard to see a bill, if you go too far in Joe Manchin's direction, the Bernie Sanders wing is going to object and vice versa. So it is a very delicate balance.
Well, the other news out of there was on busting up the filibuster. Kyrsten Sinema, the Arizona senator, and Joe Manchin publicly have said that they would not vote to do that. But he said, the senator said, that there are other Democrats he's talked to who are in that boat. Mara, I want to turn to immigration. President Biden defending his executive orders and actions, now more than 43, that have been signed, this one on immigration, and he said that I'm not making new law, I'm eliminating bad policy.
Well, several of the immigration executive orders are basically to study the situation, see how you can reunite parents with their children when they were separated, to see what you can do to stop a surge at the border that might include giving more aid to countries in Central America to keep people from going to the United States. So far, these executive orders are attempts to put something in the place of the Trump immigration policy.
8, I inform the House that Mr. Ham will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
What he's trying to tell people is be fearless in the kitchen, you know.
Chef Philip Ashley Ricks making his dreams come true while providing moments of decadence for the rest of us. Chris Pallone, NBC News.
And now I need some chocolate. Now, if you're looking to satisfy your sweet tooth, Chef Phillips' collaboration with Woodford Reserve is available at philipashleychocolates.com. Unfortunately, the forecast this week, not so sweet. Tyler has a final check of that forecast when we come back.
Seal at my favorite places.
It means help. Book, meeting with friends, and perhaps drinking some wine. But a group that calls themselves the Fabulous Ladies Book Club took it one step further. Dr. Carrie Rath is one of only 2 OBGYNs in her New Mexico county. So when she was asked to help vaccinate her community, she didn't think twice.
What was your goal in terms of the health of your town?
I've watched our ICUs overflow. I'm going to try not to cry when I talk about it. We needed a way to extricate ourselves. Excuse me. And I felt like this was how we could do it.
You've seen the real costs.
I have.
But she knew she couldn't do it alone. So Dr. Rath reached out to the first people that came to mind, her book club.
They're my girls. They're who I call when I need something.
It only took one text to the fabulous Ladies Book Club, and they were all in.
And Casey, did you think, I already have a full-time job, I don't have time to do this?
No, not at all, because I had no idea the magnitude that it would be. I'm like, sure.
Only the medical professionals give the shots. The rest, they handle the logistics. After 21 clinics, the fabulous ladies are on their way to fully vaccinating 2,300 people.
What do your families think about all this?
I brought both of my children in to help, and we were heading home, and my son, he said, Mom, I think what you're doing is really special, and it's really important.
This sounds like a great plot of a good book. A group of women band together to save their town.
Yes, it does sound kind of like a great plot. I agree.
They are an incredible group of women, and they are true community organizers. We'll be right back.
And a 500 immune health.
Deal online. It doesn't.
The 2021 ES250 all.
Berlin Wall came down, just as Ken had predicted. Soviet Union broke up peacefully, and this was a remarkable triumph of American democracy and strategy.
California seek recognition.
Mr. Speaker, as the member designated by Mr. Jones, pursuant to HRES 8, I will inform the House that Mr. Jones will vote yes on ordering the previous question.
Or uncontrollable muscle movements, which may be
Yes.
Leaf filter filters out. Plus, they'll be sticking around during the day. Pretty uneventful heading into Wednesday evening, but then by later Wednesday night into early Thursday morning, we'll begin to see a rain-snow mix make its way throughout the area and then become primarily all snow after midnight tomorrow night. We'll be looking at some slightly higher total accumulations in parts of northwestern Iowa. We could see about 2 to 4 inches of snowfall. Otherwise, the wind picks up on Thursday, and that cold air not too far behind. Highs in the single digits by the weekend.
0 to 100 real quick. Or I should say 100 to 0 in this instance.
Yeah.
Things escalated pretty quickly. We appreciate it, though, Tyler. NBC Nightly News is next here on KDLT. Dakota South continues.
And I'm not expecting.
Better notable? Nah, Jake, you're looking swell. $1 million bucks.
Arcega helps keep meat.
Increased appetite, nausea, diarrhea, and vomiting, which boost glucose control product. Neither should you.
To know there's a place where people miss the beat.
That's him.
Ordering the previous question. As the member designated by Ms. Frankel, pursuant to HRES 8, I inform the House that Ms. Frankel will vote yes on ordering the previous question. As the member designated by...
Now, is it perfect? Is this the answer? Is this the containment strategy from 46 and 47 that was the triumph of American diplomacy over the last 50?
Hi, I'm a new customer and I want your best new smartphone deal.
Well, I'm an existing customer and I'd like...
Quickly to restore free breathing. Primatene Mist. Breathe easy again.
How great is it? And that has Carla feeling so confident that she can enjoy her dream right now. No, buddy. Only pay for what you need. Liberty, 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 liberty.
This is Carrie.
Today, and pay no interest.
After Navalny was sentenced to those 2.5 and more years in jail, his supporters called on the people that support Alexei Navalny to come to the area that I'm in right now, to come to the area around the Kremlin. However, the Russian authorities and Vladimir Putin had something waiting for them. The entire Kremlin was surrounded by Russian riot police, and they even sent squads of riot police
into the streets around here that then detained almost anybody that they could find. We ourselves witnessed dozens of detentions. We saw some of those folks out here treated very harshly by the riot police. In total, I just got the recent number, Wolf, more than 1,000 people today detained in Moscow, in the Russian capital alone. That's according to an independent organization. It certainly came after a remarkable trial that took place in a Moscow court where Alexei Navalny, as he spoke, ripped into Vladimir Putin, calling him Putin the poisoner and saying that is what he will be remembered at. He called this trial that happened here a sham trial. Well, some of the things that Alexei Navalny said in jail are things that are very dangerous to say in Russia, especially in a public setting like that. And as you already mentioned, the court then decided that Alexei Navalny was going to spend considerable amount of time behind bars, at least 2.5 years, probably even a little more, as a suspended sentence that he had already been under was turned into a real jail sentence. We've heard from Alexei Navalny's legal team. They say they are going to file an appeal, but certainly this is quite a blow for Alexei Navalny. However, his supporters vow that the demonstrations will continue. Wolf?
They will get from the freezer.
Why do you have chocolate on your face?
It was under a pie.
Mike and Molly.
Why are you so tall?
Why are you so handsome?
And The Simpsons.
Seriously.
I know.
With late night laughs. Only on Fox Sioux Falls.
Tonight, the surprise shakeup for Amazon and its billionaire founder, Jeff Bezos, one of the richest men in the world, stepping down as Amazon's CEO after building the company that has changed the American way of life. What's behind his decision and the new role he's taking on? Also, the 2 FBI special agents killed while serving a warrant at a home in Florida. One of the fallen draped in a flag. What we're learning about the suspect. The deadly storm pounding the Northeast for a second day. Nearly 3 feet of snow in some areas. Homes collapsing and the new threat developing. The White House announcing plans to speed up COVID vaccinations. The key role pharmacies will play. And inside the labs on the hunt for variants. The House impeachment managers laying out their case against former President Trump a week before his trial. Democrats saying he summoned a mob and aimed them like a loaded cannon at the Capitol. How Trump's legal team is responding. The 9-year-old pepper sprayed by police. Her mother speaking out to us about the action she's now taking. Paying tribute to the 100-year-old World War II veteran who inspired the world.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, everyone. It's not often we would start the broadcast with news of a change in one of this country's corporate suites, but arguably no company has changed the way we live quite like Amazon. And late today, its CEO Jeff Bezos delivered the surprising news he's stepping down from the helm of the shopping empire he formed in 1994. That late development, just one of the major stories we're covering tonight, that includes a deadly day for the FBI. 2 agents killed while trying to serve a criminal warrant in Florida. Then there's the urgent effort to identify COVID variants in this country that could dramatically impact the fight against the pandemic. But on this busy news night, let's start with the breaking news about Amazon. Jolene Kent reports.
After more than 25 years and billions in sales, Jeff Bezos is leaving his post as CEO this summer, handing the reins of the massive disruptor he built to Andy Jassy, the current head of Amazon Web Services. In an internal email, Bezos, who will become executive chair, said, "I intend to focus my energies and attention on new products and early initiatives. I'm excited about this transition." Early in his career, Bezos left his job in finance, founding Amazon in 1994. He spoke with NBC News about that career move in 1999.
But I might really have regretted not having participated in this thing called the internet that I thought was going to be a really big deal.
And it was. What began as an online bookseller grew fast.
Work hard, have fun, make history is our motto.
Ultimately becoming a mega online retailer with more than 1 million workers.
He's almost singularly responsible for every major thing that they've done over the past 25 years.
The company is often criticized for undercutting small businesses by aggressively lowering prices. Bezos is now one of the richest people in the world. His recent divorce from Mackenzie Scott was one of the most expensive ever. After
country.
of Sioux Falls. Police say 18-year-old Cesar Jesus Valier stole a vehicle that was left running outside a home. An officer spotted the vehicle a short time later and tried to get him to stop. The suspect then drove off at high speeds and hit several cars. When the car broke down, Valier reportedly tried to run away.
It doesn't take long for somebody to come upon a running car and decide that they want to drive away with it. People are going to let their car run for a number of different reasons, and that's fine, but they have to monitor it. They have to watch.
Valier faces several charges, including possession of a stolen vehicle, grand theft, hit and run, and reckless driving.
All right, let's get a check of our weather. It's the one day of the year that Trobeck hates because he gets overshadowed by a groundhog.
But you know what? It's a little bit like the movie, Don. Some things just don't change from day to day. Every day we have clouds and fog, or at least it feels like it anyway. It's going to be another night of the same here in Sioux Falls. You can see a little light fog off in the distance there. View from Falls Park of the Arc. 27 degrees right now. At least it's mild, and our temperature's actually been near normal for this time of year. Watertown also, the fog's starting to get...
It's largely silent on Greene. It isn't just because she's a Republican. It is because she is a Trump Republican. Because the House GOP at this hour actually has absolutely no trouble calling out one of its own. They're meeting tomorrow to discuss Congresswoman Liz Cheney's future. Cheney, third-ranking Republican, they have no problem slamming her all the time because she stood up to Trump's big lie about election fraud and then voted to hold him accountable for the Capitol riot. And so, this is how her fellow Republicans have absolutely no problem publicly talking about her.
How can you even call yourself a representative when you don't represent the will of the people?
I don't think she should be the chair of the Republican conference anymore. The reality is she's not representing the conference. She's not representing the Republican ideals.
She's not representing the Trump Republican ideals. Not a whole lot of outrage over Marjorie Taylor Greene in the House. Plenty over Liz Cheney. And it should come as no surprise because the apples on this do not fall far from the Trump tree.
We got to get rid of the weak Congress people, the ones that aren't any good, the Liz Cheneys of the world.
Manu Raju is out front live on Capitol Hill. And Manu, what more are you learning about this meeting that we understand is imminent between McCarthy and Greene tonight?
Yeah, I was actually just standing outside Kevin McCarthy's office. They closed the door in the hallway that door is typically open. This meeting could be actually happening right now as the House is voting. I have talked to a number of other House Republicans, including the number 2 Republican, Steve Scalise, and asked him whether or not he believes that she should be stripped from her committee assignments. She sits on the House Education Committee, also in the House Budget Committee. I said, do you support getting rid of those committee assignments? He would not say it. He said that this is a discussion that the Republican conference has to have tomorrow. He said he still wants to have a discussion with Kevin McCarthy. I said, do you have any concerns about Marjorie Taylor Greene's views? And he told me, I've been, quote, very, very vocal about it. I do. That is in reference, apparently, to what he said last summer, raising concerns when it first came to light about her controversial posts on social media, her videos, and things she's conspiratorial views she said in her alliance with QAnon at that time. Now, since then, Scalise set aside those concerns. He ultimately got behind her like most other House Republicans did after she won her runoff race. Other Republicans clearly are aligning themselves with her at the moment. Jim Jordan, who is a Republican House member, a very close Trump ally, just told me moments ago he does not support kicking her off of those 2 committees. He believes she should stay on those committees. Jordan himself is waging a battle to try to get Liz Cheney out of her leadership spot. Now, if the Republicans don't move themselves, Aaron, if Kevin McCarthy does not move, then House Democrats plan to do so themselves. They plan to move a resolution to the House floor as soon as Thursday to kick her off those committees. And just moments ago, Aaron, the House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer told me he has some concerns about the precedent that would set if House Republicans in the majority go after one of their members.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly does. It's not the way you want to do it. And it actually feeds into the same feeling of partisanship, which this shouldn't be about, right? This, as you hear McConnell and Romney and Ernst and Cassidy, this one's not partisan. All right, thank you very much, Manu. And Manu's going to come back up. We find out about this meeting, as he said, it might be happening right now. I want to go right now, though, to former Republican Congresswoman Barbara Comstock and our own Michael Smerconish. Congresswoman Comstock, let me ask you, you go through this and you see a House GOP largely silent, not uniformly, there are, the Cmgus of the world, but largely silent on the issue of Marjorie Taylor Greene, but completely unafraid to call out Liz Cheney constantly. What does this tell you?
Well, I don't think it's going to be a tough vote tomorrow. I think Marjorie Greene is going to be gone, kicked off her committees, whether it's done by Republicans or Democrats. And I'm confident that Liz Cheney will retain her leadership position. So I wouldn't, the loudmouths that are out there all the time, attacking Liz or attacking others, they don't represent the entire conference. And I think a lot of the conference is sick of these loudmouths intimidating them into this dead-end policy of supporting people like Marjorie Greene. Let's make sure people understand. It was Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows, along with help from Matt Gaetz, who gave us Marjorie Greene. Steve Scalise did her in the primary. I'm on a woman's Republican PAC, View PAC. We opposed and supported her male opponent, a brain surgeon. We could have had a brain surgeon in this position instead of her. So I think her views are unacceptable. I think she should also be kicked. I'd vote to kick her out of the conference. So I think this is, wants to be represented by her. You don't have members who want to have her face in their ads 2 years from now saying that they stood by her. So I think these loudmouths who are defending her are going to be a smaller number of people than you think.
A preview of sorts tonight of next week's impeachment trial of former President Trump. Democrats set to argue he incited a mob to violence. Mr. Trump's lawyers calling the whole proceeding unconstitutional. Here's Kristen Welker.
Tonight, House Democrats unveiling their impeachment case, pinning the blame for the deadly Capitol riot squarely on former President Trump, saying Mr. Trump, quote, summoned a mob to Washington, exhorted them into a frenzy, and aimed them like a loaded cannon down Pennsylvania Avenue, that he refused to accept the will of the American people, even quoting Liz Cheney, one of the few House Republicans who voted to impeach, who said President Trump lit the flame of this attack. In their brief, Democrats pointing to this fiery speech at the rally before the riot.
We love you! And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
But in their defense today, Mr. Trump's legal team saying the former president was only exercising his First Amendment right to express his belief that the election results were suspect. And they say he did not incite violence.
This is a very, very dangerous road to take with respect to the First Amendment, putting at risk any passionate political speaker, which is really against everything we believe in this country.
Mr. Trump's team also argues it is unconstitutional to hold a trial to try to remove the former president because he holds no public office from which he can be removed. But tonight, Democrats are blasting that argument, saying there is no January exception to impeachment.
The trial must go on, and he must be held accountable.
Well, Kristen, Democrats still have a steep climb for a conviction, don't they?
That's right. Only 5 Republican senators say this trial is even constitutional, and Democrats would need 17 GOP votes for a conviction. Lester.
Kristen Welker at the White House, thanks. And a candid and emotional account of what it was like inside the Capitol during the attack from Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who also made a deeply personal revelation. Casey Hunt has more.
Tonight, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sharing a harrowing and emotional account of what happened to her during the Capitol riot.
All of a sudden, I hear boom, 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 boom on my door.
Afraid rioters were coming after her, she hid in a bathroom inside her private office.
And I'm like this, and the door hinges right here, and I just hear, "Where is she? Where is she?" I mean, I thought I was going to die.
When she came out of the bathroom, she found a Capitol police officer. She and a staffer eventually barricading themselves inside a fellow Congresswoman's office as rioters raged. In the 90-minute live broadcast to her Instagram followers, also making this revelation.
I'm a survivor of sexual assault. And I haven't told many people that in my life. But when we go through trauma compounds on each other.
And members of Congress and the country will be living through the trauma again next week as former President Trump's impeachment trial unfolds, with Democratic managers expected to use powerful video from the day as evidence. Lester.
All right, Casey, thank you. There's sad news tonight of the World War II veteran we've been following who inspired the world during this pandemic, Captain Tom Moore, who raised $45 million for UK frontline workers by walking laps in his garden, has died after his own battle with COVID. Moore was 100 years old, one of those people you will never forget. In just 60 seconds, the mother of a 9-year-old girl pepper sprayed by police speaks out to us as hundreds take to the streets.
If you have postmenopausal,
well, enjoy these temperatures while we have them. Phil has more on the changes ahead in his first alert forecast, which is coming up next.
Pay unemployment bonuses, which would make it more, basically the math says you do better by not working than by working. It's harder to get people back to work. And the other thing that Republicans are very concerned about is these bailouts for big cities and blue states and places that really have a history of bad behavior when it comes to managing their finances unrelated to coronavirus.
Well, I'm sure you know that many of these cities and states say that that money goes toward people who are working on the front lines, police, first responders, and others. But we are going to continue to be looking at that. I do want to also ask you, Senator, about something that the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has said in the last day about Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia. He said, and I'm quoting, "Loony lies and conspiracy theories are cancer for the Republican Party and our country." He went on to refer to her view that perhaps no airplane hit the World Trade Center on 9/11, saying that horrifying school shootings where children died were pre-staged. Do you agree with him?
Well, yeah. I find her statements disturbing. That's not the future that I see for the Republican Party. I know the House is going to have to make its own decisions on what path they take. But all the time that is spent on her is distracting from the work we need to do for the American people of getting people back to work and kids back to school and the coronavirus behind us.
And Senator, I also want to ask you about another member of Congress, and that is your fellow Republican Liz Cheney, who represents the state of Wyoming, your home state. She has come under attack from other Republicans for voting to impeach President Trump. You had a Republican congressman go to Wyoming to say she shouldn't be reelected. Do you think she should be removed from a leadership role in the House based on what she's voted, what she's done?
No, I support Liz Cheney. We work closely together on issues impacting Wyoming. I will tell you, I have a different position on impeachment that she does. This is now coming to the Senate, and I believe that it's unconstitutional for us in the Senate to go through a trial of impeachment of somebody who is no longer in office, and the fact that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court isn't going to preside tells me that it is not a legitimate process.
Rebelsis works.
It's going to be cold this weekend as well. Highs only in the teens, but at least some sub-zero mornings. Rapid City not quite as cold, but still chilly. Teens
Lower their blood sugar and reach.
See if I can see my shadow, and I didn't. And but later on this afternoon, there's a little bit of sun coming through. That doesn't count. I think it's the morning that counts, right? So, and by the way, that Punxsutawney Phil thing this morning, if you watch the video, it's cloudy and it's snowing. How he could see his shadow, I have no idea. But anyway,
put it on the rug.
Probably that's what happened. So here's a look. Yeah, let's take a look at what's happening across the country.
If you get a lump or swelling in your
without an opportunity.
Serious side effects may include pancreatitis.
One concern I have is that COVID is still spreading in Chicago.
Robbie Suave is associate editor of Reason.com and the author of Panic Attack, Young Radicals in the Age of Trump. Robbie, it sounds to me like she's saying thanks for all the money, but we still ain't going back to work.
Yeah, that was quite the admission, wasn't it? The teachers' unions, it's Lucy in the football. No matter what they get, no matter how many concessions are met, they still say, well, we're not going back to work yet. I mean, in no exaggeration, one starts to get the feeling that they never intend, under any circumstance, to go back to the classroom. Certainly, COVID will still exist next school year. Hopefully we'll have it very well under control, but there will still be people in this country who get it. Again, hopefully very few, and that very few will be dying from it. But this is a problem we'll be dealing with to some extent for a long time. And are we really going to keep our public school children, some of the children most in need of education, we're going to keep them out of the classroom, what, forever? For years? I mean, that's, I can't even comprehend the consequences of doing that, and the teachers' unions very cavalierly seem to think that that's fine.
You know, Robbie, you put your finger on it, the word consequences. I confess my bias. I have lived with a public school teacher for the last 31 years. She loves her children. She's been back in the classroom since August. What are the consequences of this lost year of learning for the children, and who is speaking up for the children?
Right, the teachers don't, the students don't have a union to speak for them, so their voice is often absent from this. The long-term consequences for them will be terrible in terms of their readiness for college, and then their employment prospects, their math, reading, etc. will be set back. But I'm almost more worried about the immediate, the psychological effects. There are kids who haven't seen their friends in like a year. School is the social hub of adolescence. And to not have that for as long as we've not had that, there was a terrible story, it's truly terrible, about...
That's my turtle. Fraud protection. Discover something brighter.
Simpsons.
Seriously.
I know.
With late night laughs, only on Fox Sioux Falls.
Millions of Americans going hungry during the pandemic. President Biden has vowed more help is on the way, but is the federal government doing enough? We get more from Cynthia McFadden.
Kinda McKinney Anderson isn't about to let a little bad weather stop her from helping her neighbors.
Hi, Jerry. How you doing? Kids need to eat. Families need to eat.
The founder of Inner City Youth Group, a small nonprofit serving Detroit's East Side, has been mobilized since the start of the pandemic.
Come on up.
We've been following her since March, before mask wearing was encouraged, as she and her volunteers began handing out lunches to children who were home from school. By her count, over 150,000 meals in the last 10 months.
I keep doing it because this is something that our families need, and it won't go away.
Families like Barry Chambly and Melissa Michaud, with 5 kids, all under the age of 10.
We were just regular, working people, just trying to take care of our kids.
The pandemic threw them both out of work, but their families and neighbors and Miss Kinda stepped in.
We've had a lot of help, and we are extremely grateful for that, because for a few weeks in between March and May, it got
rough.
Have you been scared?
Oh yeah.
Very, very much so.
But so far, they've received no help from government food programs. Even though their children were receiving free school lunches, they say they haven't been able to figure out how to apply for a federal program designed to give them money to replace those meals.
The kids kind of eat like birds sometimes, but they also kind of eat like dinosaurs another time.
They did apply for SNAP assistance, a debit card that replaces the old food stamp program, used by 43 million people, a stunning 1 in 8 in America, up 6 million people since the pandemic. For a family of 7 to qualify, their income needs to be under $52,000.
What's your best estimate of your yearly income now?
It's like 20,000 or under.
For the two of you, that's combined.
That's combined.
That's combined.
You've applied for the SNAP program.
We've been denied several times. It said that I need to turn in verifications of end of employment for jobs that Barry hasn't had in years.
Company doesn't even exist anymore.
Has it been hard to get people on the phone?
Yes, yes.
This is what my new job is keeping me up at night, is who are we missing?
Stacey Dean was appointed by President Biden to head up the Food and Nutrition Service at the Department of Agriculture. She says their goal is to help people like Melissa and Barry.
The process of applying for SNAP benefits is tough. It's incredibly rigorous. And trying to carry that out in a remote environment has made it, I think, a little bit more difficult.
She says the administration hopes to improve that and also wants a review of the benefits themselves. Right now, the average meal benefit is $1.40, bumped to $2 because of the pandemic.
Pretty hard to feed yourself on $2 a meal, but I mean $6 a day?
Yes, we understand that that's a struggle, and that's why we really want to take a look at whether those benefits are adequate for a basic healthy diet.
In December, Congress passed a $13 billion aid package targeted at food. I mean, how much more do you need?
We need as much as we need. I don't think we can put a number on that right now. It is a crisis.
No need to explain that. Back in Detroit, Cynthia McFadden, NBC News.
An important story for so many. Up next, why some want to send the groundhog out for one more look or maybe get a second opinion.
9 p.m. on Fox Sioux Falls, and catch a full hour of news on the weeknights.
A comprehensive plan to overhaul the entire U.S. immigration system. Alna Navaz is here with a look at where these moves fit into that larger landscape.
That's right, Judy. Today's actions follow earlier executive orders from President Biden that he signed in his very first days in office, orders that immediately had an impact on thousands of people. We spoke to a few of them to get their reactions, and here's what they had to say.
My name is Jose Aguiluz. I'm 31 years old. I am a registered nurse that is currently working in COVID vaccinations, and I am a DACA recipient.
Mark J. Daniels, I'm the sheriff of Cochise County, Arizona, located in the southeast corner of the state of Arizona.
My name is Carla. I'm currently undocumented, but I recently applied for DACA for the first time in December.
My name is Rodolfo Karish. I go by Rudy. I retired from the U.S. Border Patrol in December of 2019 after spending more than 3 decades in the organization.
My name is Haya. I am 20 years old and I'm a first generation American. So my family and my sister are Syrian. I am currently living in Canada. We sought refuge here because of the Muslim ban.
When President Biden announced that he was going to strengthen DACA, was really a sense of relief, to be honest. It pretty much gave me a little bit of relief that I was going to be able to stay in the country and keep doing what I'm doing, keep taking care of my patients and everything. When I started with the Dream Act movement, it was like 10 years ago. I'm still a dreamer, I still have DACA, so 10 years have passed and there's still no solution.
When I saw that President Biden halted border issues to include the physical barrier, relooking at how we're doing business, to include the release program, releasing who normally would be put back into Mexico or deported or held in a prosecutional level. It was a little disappointing. And I'll say this, I think it was hasty. What I've seen in the past is those that should be held accountable in the criminal justice system are not. And those that should be detained or deported are not. And then what happens is they move into communities and bad things happen.
There's always been that fear for myself that maybe I won't be allowed to stay here for a while. But there's at least a chance for me to get protection with DACA. Whereas with my family, they will be living under this fear for an indefinite amount of time. Undocumented immigrants still pay taxes. They still, go shopping, contribute to the economy, and are active members in their communities. And despite all that, we still live in fear every day that we don't feel welcome here.
You can't rush these things. You have to look at what previous administrations did to see what's working, rather than coming in with a wrecking ball to start off with and completely wipe out all of the initiatives that a prior administration has done. I can tell you that where we put up wall or fences, it's deterred the flow of narcotics. So I think that you also have to look at other things that it does prevent.
When I was a senior in high school living in the United States with my extended family, my parents couldn't attend my graduation because of the Muslim ban. And when the Biden administration repealed the Muslim ban, it was an immense relief for us. We were very excited. And the first thing we did, of course, was talk to our family in the United States, making plans about the summer, about the winter, about breaks. I think every immigrant, every person has the right to seek the opportunity to come to the United States, to seek citizenship, and to live a life of dignity.
So, Amna, so important to hear these different voices. President Biden.
Pandemic fan club of cardboard cutouts and the rest of us.
What is going on?
Bill Murray played a weatherman trapped in the fickle groundhog's wintry spell. As a mild-mannered reporter in Chicago, I've been living it for 2 decades.
It's Groundhog Day.
It's still just once a year, isn't it?
But let's face it, in a pandemic, every day feels like Groundhog Day.
To the groundhog.
To the groundhog. So, Phil, please go back to sleep and reconsider. Kevin Tibble's NBC News, Chicago.
Yeah, go back for another answer. That's Nightly News for this Tuesday. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm Lester Holt. Please take care of yourself and each other. Good night.
Calling out by name Republicans like Senator Cruz, Hawley, and Congressman Roy, among others, who she has repeatedly tangled with online since the attack, even saying to Senator Cruz, "You almost had me murdered 3 weeks ago," denouncing them and speaking on a personal level about how painful it is that some have suggested she just move on.
These are the same tactics of abusers.
And for the first time, revealing her own past history with sexual assault.
I'm a survivor of sexual assault. And I haven't told many people that in my life.
And we did hear back from one of the Republicans that the Congresswoman called out directly in that video. Congressman Chip Roy, he said he's saddened to learn about the experience that she had with sexual assault, but he says that does not change her allegations, which he calls, Aaron, completely unacceptable allegations against Senator Cruz. Now, we have not heard back from Senator Cruz about his being named in that video last night by the Congresswoman. Even as she doubles down on attacks on him tonight, Aaron, and calling him again to resign.
Sunland, thank you very much. And next, the opposition leader who says he was poisoned by Putin has some choice words for the Russian president as he is sentenced to prison.
Coordinate vaccination. Heart.
When you talk about the funding, President Biden has said that he wants to give schools $130 billion to help them reopen, and he wants them to reopen, at least most of them, by April. How realistic is that timeline, especially because you have some teachers' unions that are saying they don't even believe their teachers are going to feel safe to go back to school in the fall?
You know, Stephanie, educators all over this country worked really, really hard to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as our president and our vice president. And we did that because they made a commitment. They made a commitment to prioritize getting the coronavirus under control. They made a commitment to investing in our state and local governments. They made a commitment because he understands that as he listens to his experts, the director at the CDC, to Dr. Fauci and others, they know that even with vaccines, we have to continue to provide our schools with the resources they need for all of those other mitigation strategies.
Becky, I know you have also focused on inequity in schools, and one thing we have learned is that virtual learning is exacerbating those inequities along racial and socioeconomic lines. So can you talk to the urgency about getting kids back in person from that lens?
Stephanie, there's no question that our Black and Brown and Indigenous communities have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and all of the crises that it's spawned. It is absolutely essential that as we think about the resources that we need to put into our schools and our communities, that we address these inequities, not only as it relates to the pandemic, but as it relates to the economic crisis that we're facing, the healthcare crisis. All of those things determine whether our students can learn. We absolutely must invest in our students, all of them, but especially those that have been impacted the most.
The pandemic has highlighted so much, Becky, including the importance of our nation.
$1,000 the minimum cash amount on there.
Lieutenant Dan will serve as a guest judge. The winner will be announced on March 23rd.
That's pretty hard to beat, I'm not going to lie. Well, Buffalo Wild Wings believes that the only thing better than extra football is free wings. The restaurant is offering free 6-count wings if Sunday's Super Bowl game goes into overtime. This deal is for everyone in the United States and our neighbors up north in Canada. If there is an overtime, the deal will happen on February 22nd from 4 to 7 local time. And this is the third year Buffalo Wild Wings has offered free wings, but there was a decisive victor after 4 quarters the last 2 years. According to Buffalo Wild Wings gaming partner BetMGM, there is a 10% chance of free wings, but they are saying there is a chance. Very little chance to enjoy the weather that's on the horizon. It's going to get pretty chilly. Tyler has a final check of that when we come back.
10. National peace and security at Carnegie.
Receive are subject to federal campaign limits of roughly $10,000, but others are 501c3s and 501c4s that are dark money nonprofits, and they together, all of these groups raise well into the 9 figures, and so the Republicans are faced with the prospect of trying to take on Abrams while she's got these political organizations that in the past have done everything they can to advance her political career, and so obviously these political consultants and a group of finance people have decided to mount a super PAC effort against her. All well and good, all legal, but I'll tell you this, I got a weird thought. I'm not certain she's running for governor. I think she's running for president. Wow. And I think she looks at Joe Biden and says, he's in there for 1 term, and so why should I run for governor? I'd love to have an ally of mine beat Brian Kemp, get elected governor of the state with my help. But you know what? I'm running for president in 2024, and running for governors would tie me down with legislative session and a real job. I'm focused on the White House.
Carl, you mentioned 2024. You have one of the more well-respected political minds in the country. What advice would you give Republicans as they head into 2022 and 2024? The map looks pretty tough in the Senate and maybe a little easier in the House, but what counsel would you give them?
Well, number one, we need to figure out what we're for. We're going to find ourselves easy to oppose things that the Biden administration is doing, and that's important. But we've also got to decide what we're for. How do we take our conservative principles and apply them to the changing circumstances of this new century? Second of all, we have got to get our act together in terms of registering voters and the basic blocking and tackling to get out the vote. And that's going to be really critical to us. We need to have a greater emphasis on diversity. I don't think it's an accident that in California, the Republicans, for the first time in the history of the state, it joined the Union in 1850, knocked off 4 Democrat incumbent members of Congress, and they did so with 2 Asian Americans, both women, and 2 Latinos, both guys. And I don't think that it's an accident. I know you and I are huge fans of Tim Scott. I've heard your interview with him recently. He's a terrific figure. We need more like him, and Elise Stefanik and Liz Cheney and Nikki Haley, and the diversity that is our country. It's one of our strengths. It ought to be one of our strengths.
Well, we had a moment of accord. You and I both love most of the names you just mentioned, so I'm going to end. We got about a minute. I'm going to end by asking you a tough question. But you got a great political mind, and I don't know who else to ask. You got Mitch McConnell, you got Kevin McCarthy in the House. Speaking of Georgia, you got a congresswoman in Georgia that is threatening to define the Republican Party. How do you keep a big tent but keep the fringes kind of out of the main dining area?
Yeah, look, if you believe that the Jews control a space laser that starts fires in Northern California, and that there's some unnamed high-ranking government official who's got a heretofore unknown security classification called Q, and all the nutty things that flow with that, you should be taken off the prestigious House Education and Labor Committee and confined to the dark recesses of the furthest building away from the House floor, and then let the voters decide in the next election. She is a problem for our party.
Very, very bluntly stated advice, very concise. Thank you, Carl. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's conversations. For more, check out my podcast at foxnewspodcast.com. Thank you for watching. I'm Trey Gowdy. I'll see you again tomorrow night. Tucker Carlson is up next. Hey, Tucker.
Good evening. Welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight we've got an admission for you. For more than 4 years, we've been telling you almost every week that the biggest threat to your basic freedoms in America He's not actually the federal government. We thought that for a long time. The federal government is infuriating. It can be stupid and dangerous, obviously. But at least in the case of the government, you theoretically have some control over its behavior since it's a democracy. In this moment, right now, the bigger threat to your family turn out to be huge publicly held corporations, particularly the tech monopolies. Why? Because you have zero control over their behavior. They truly aren't interested in what you think, and yet they have enormous control over your life, and you should be worried about that. You probably already are worried about it. Here's the correction we want to make. We were wrong. Rest easy, America. We've got happy news for you tonight. Good tidings from our friends in the academic research community. On Monday, a pair of researchers from New York University in New York City released what they described as a study of social media and censorship. And they didn't hide their conclusions in footnotes. They got right to it in the title. This new paper is called, quote, False Accusation, the Unfounded Claim that Social Media Companies Censor Conservatives. It's quite a literal study. So it turns out what we've been telling you for years isn't true. It's merely an unfounded claim. There's no truth to it. That's what they concluded. It's all there in the paper. We read it. On page 16, we learned that, yes, quote, conservatives frequently point to Twitter's practice of suspending or permanently banning account holders as evidence of bias against the right. And that is true. They never stop whining, those conservatives. Happily, the study concludes, however, facts don't support this claim. Conservatives do get suspended or banned for violating Twitter's rules against such things as harassment, hateful conduct, or in Trump's case, glorifying violence. But, this is the good news, liberals are excluded in this fashion as well.
Striking a match and then seeking personal advantage from the ensuing havoc. Impeachment managers lay out in stark terms the effect that Trump's words and actions had in the lead up to that crucial date. He spent the weeks preceding his rally doing everything in his power to persuade attendees that their votes in the election itself were going to be stolen away in the joint session of Congress. That is, unless they somehow stopped it by making plans to fight like hell and fight to the death against this act of war by radical left Democrats and the weak and ineffective rhino section of the Republican Party. By this point, it was clear that President Trump was comfortable urging, approving, and even celebrating violence. Answering to the president's call to mobilize, thousands arrived in Washington for the purpose, aggressively championed by the president, of doing anything necessary to stop the joint session of Congress from finalizing the election results.
Ruled on his side.
Former President Brad Raffensperger. Here's a portion of their phone call.
We have won this election in Georgia based on all of this. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, Brad. The people of Georgia are angry. The people of the country are angry. And there's nothing wrong with saying that, you know, that you've recalculated.
Well, Mr. President, the challenge that you have is the data you have is wrong.
The data you have is wrong. Is that insufficient evidence? Again, that's a guy who voted for the former president, who wanted him to win. He just didn't want to lie and cheat for him. And here's his deputy, also a Republican, back in December, warning the former president about the potentially violent consequences of lying about election fraud.
Mr. President, you have not condemned these actions or this language. Senators, you have not condemned this language or these actions. This has to stop. Someone's going to get hurt, someone's going to get shot, someone's going to get killed.
It was more than a month before the attack. 4 days later, armed Trump supporters descended on the home of Michigan's Secretary of State, stoked by the defeated president's false claims about election fraud there. A week later, so-called Stop the Steal rallies across the country turned violent. You see them there. 4 people are stabbed in Washington. That same morning at 8:05, the president tweets, quote, "I won the election in a landslide." House impeachment managers say they plan to show precisely this kind of incitement and effect from what the president says to what his violent supporters do. Not all his supporters are violent, far from it. But we're talking about the violent supporters. This video, compiled by the organization Just Security, shows the former president's remarks on the 6th of January synchronized with how some people in the mob responded at each moment, taken from videos posted mainly on social media. Here's a portion.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol. Yeah, we're going to walk down to the Capitol. Yeah.
Capitol building. Take the Capitol. Take the Capitol. Take the Capitol. Take the Capitol. Take the Capitol right now.
So that's how the former president's words were received by a number of people who'd been fed a diet month after month of lies by the former president. They've been told not to believe the officials, not to believe the judges, the Supreme Court's judges, not to believe the electors. They've been told both day and night, day after day, that they had every right to be angry. Yet somehow, his attorneys in their filing today claim, and I quote, "It is denied that the phrase, 'if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore,' had anything to do with the action at the Capitol, as it was clearly about the need to fight for election security in general." It sure doesn't seem like a lot of the folks who attacked the Capitol were just doing it for election security in general. That didn't seem to be the rallying cry. Some of them were overtly comparing this to a new American revolution and chanting about hanging Mike Pence.
That's what we're doing, fighting back.
And what's the point? What's the end game?
What's the point?
Yeah.
We're losing our freedom. What do you mean, what's the point?
Describe it to me.
I'm going to describe it to you. You're not even knowing is that I will describe it to you. What are we supposed to do? Okay? The Supreme Court's not helping us. No one's helping us. Only us can help us.
Okay.
Only we can do it.
What are you going to do?
Whatever we have to do. What do you think 1776 was?
What do you think 1776 was? That guy's name is Barton Shively. He's been charged with aiding and abetting civil disorder, forcibly assaulting or interfering with a federal officer, and violent entry. The president's new team of attorneys will be arguing that he was just at the Capitol fighting metaphorically for election security in general. Looking at the Capitol tonight, hard not to think about all that happened there, not even a month ago, and the 7 lives lost in the wake of it. Lives taken, not lost. And shortly tonight, one of the fallen returns home to it. The question now is, how will he be honored by the men and women he protected and the democracy he died to save? Perspective now from CNN contributor, Republican election attorney Benjamin Ginsburg, also CNN senior legal analyst Preet Bharara, former U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. So Ben, the filing from the former president's legal team alleging his claims of voter fraud cannot be proven false. What do you make of their filing?
Well, they had a simple task in their filing, which was to keep the 45 Republican senators who voted with them on the constitutionality provision happy. And they opened up a couple of doors that are going to cause great nervousness for that discrete jury. One of them is the First Amendment part, that he was using protected speech, even although it led to the incitement of a riot. And the notion that there was not sufficient proof to show that he was wrong in his remarks is nonsense. There were all the court cases that you referred to before. There were the certificates by the individual states that their votes were correct. And what he was saying about the election has never received any evidence at all. And that's going to make the Republican senators quite nervous.
Do you agree with that? I mean, because what Ben is saying essentially is that just the argument alone of it's unconstitutional, you cannot put a former president, you cannot impeach a former president, you can't put him on trial for impeachment for when he was in office. If they had just stuck to that, that would give cover to a lot of senators to just say, oh yeah, well, I agree with that, we don't even need to go on to the merits of the charges because it's just unconstitutional.
Yeah, look, I mean, these jurors, they're not traditional jurors that you see in a criminal trial or a civil trial in federal or state jurisdictions. And they can choose to base their vote on anything that they want. And I think they can still choose to base their vote on that constitutional argument, which, by the way, is not only wrong if you talk to the overwhelming majority of legal experts on the question, but also has failed with respect to a particular vote in the Senate. And we already had that vote. 55 to 45, including 5 Republicans, said it is okay and constitutional and proper and legal to proceed. You can, in fact, have a Senate trial of impeachment with respect to a former president. So in some ways that question is settled, and I don't know that senators of either party have much pause when it comes to what their strong beliefs are, and on the Republican side, what they want to avoid saying or doing.
Ben, is that settled? I mean, the argument that a former president can can be impeached?
I don't think it's settled. There's not any sort of court ruling about it. The Congress is the judge of its own procedures, and there's nothing to stop the 45 Republican senators from voting not to convict because they're wrong about the constitutionality argument. I mean, there's no consequence against that, which is why the Democrats need to present and have indicated they're going to present sort of a strong visual, emotional case to try and get the Republicans nervous. And again, that brief filed today is helpful to the Democrats, actually.
Helpful to the Democrats?
Now distributing black market.
We know that firemen have white privilege, along with construction workers and roofers and Uber drivers, the guys who hang drywall. Anyone who doesn't take Nancy Pelosi seriously has white privilege. But what about Bill Gates? Does he have white privilege? When was the last time someone told you that Bill Gates had white privilege? Or, for that matter, Jeff Bezos or George Soros or any other politically active billionaire? Never. It's possible the billionaires have paid for studies proving they don't have white privilege. Maybe NYU will release one of those studies soon. In the meantime, treat yourself. Watch Hillary Clinton approach the delicate question of privilege in the flesh. Here she is several years ago meeting with George Soros. Now, Soros is a man who made billions of dollars in the now infamous practice of short selling. That's been in the news recently. He was one of the pioneers of it. So you have a billionaire hedge fund manager who shorts national currencies. It's hard to imagine more privilege than that. But as you'll notice in the tape we're about to show you, Hillary Clinton does not scold George Soros for his white fragility. She never even mentioned the lingering effects of racism and the patriarchy. No. Instead, she slobbers on George Soros.
Now, among the many people who have stood up and said, I cannot sit idly by and watch this happen to the country I love, is George Soros. At this moment in time, our country needs us. And we need people like George Soros, who is fearless and willing to step up when it counts. So please join me in welcoming George Soros.
Ooh, did you see that? Did you watch the whole tape? Their meeting, the meeting between George Soros and Hillary Clinton, ends with a kiss. Not with a lecture about privilege, but with a kiss. And that's perfect, of course. George Soros isn't the problem. You're the problem. Quote, we need people like George Soros. And studies prove it. Mike Davis runs the internet account of...
Yes, impeachment that a lot of the Republicans have already made up their mind, that they've made a political decision about how this is going to turn out, and that the evidence and the presentation by the House managers is not going to change their point of view. So we'll have to see. I think there's curiosity about how this plays out, given that this was personal for so many of us and such a humiliation for our country to have its capital ransacked this way. But I think the real effort will begin when the trial begins.
In terms of the trial, I mean, this was not, we do not have a complete factual record. I mean, as I sit here talking to you, Senator, a Capitol Police officer, Officer Sicknick, who will lie in honor tonight in the Capitol, lost his life. And you and I both, unless I'm missing something, have no idea how he died, at whose hands, in what context, what happened, who the perpetrators might be, whether there's, a search for them, whether they've been identified on videotape. I mean, that's just one of the many, many factual holes in the question of what happened that day. And I wonder how much you want to learn about that, think the trial is a venue for that, or the commission that the speaker talked about today.
Well, it's the old map maker's dilemma of how much detail do you want to get into on each little segment of the coast. You can end up never finishing your map as you dive down into the detail. Here the question is a very broad one. Did the President of the United States acquit his constitutional responsibilities when he sent a mob, an inflamed mob, up to the Capitol for the purpose of their disrupting the orderly counting of the electoral votes, a direct assault led by the head of the executive branch against an ongoing operation within the legislative branch of government, and then, once he knew it was underway, failing to take any steps for a very long period of time to stop it, and indeed, according to testimony from the White House, information from the White House, I should say, actually delighting in the prospect that he created this tumult and this turmoil. So that's a pretty simple question. Was he acting the way a president of the United States should act, or was he violating the separation of powers, inciting a riot, and failing to discharge his duties to protect and defend the Constitution? You don't have to know who hit Officer Sicknick in the head with the fire extinguisher to know that Donald Trump failed at those duties.
Yeah, your understanding of the constitutional responsibility here, it's a point well taken. My journalistic instinct, which is to know as much as we can about this, which is still striking to me that we don't. The point about responsibility you make, I guess the final question here is, you said that most of your colleagues have probably made up their mind or made a political decision to have made up their mind. I do wonder how much the personal experience of it matters.
We'll see. We'll see. I think that the House, if its opening pleading is any indication, is going to put on a strong case, and it's going to bring back memories, and it's going to make people, I think, perhaps give a fresh thought to the politically comfortable position that they may be in. So I wouldn't rule it out at this point. A lot of my colleagues are honorable people. I just think they're in a political pickle on this one. And by the way, the things that you point out, we should figure that out. We should know a lot about all of this through the FBI investigation. We should know a lot about the role of our colleagues through House and Senate investigations. So I'm with you on making sure that at the end of the day, we have a full understanding of the criminal activity that took place on January 6th.
Senator Sheldon, White House, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Coming.
Decent and fair-minded Senate Republicans who are going to follow the facts, apply the law, be guided by the Constitution, and let the chips fall where they may once the compelling evidence by the impeachment managers is presented, and hold him accountable for the charge of inciting a violent insurrection.
I mean, the rules of the trial, as you know, are still being finalized. Senator Lindsey Graham on Fox News yesterday said if Democrats hold a lengthy trial, including calling witnesses, it could open up, quote, a Pandora's box. What do you make of that?
Well, I think Lindsey Graham is divorced from reality at this particular point in time because he's no longer in charge of making the decision, along with his colleagues on the other side of the aisle, in suppressing the ability of witnesses to be called or threatening to call irrelevant witnesses. That was the game that the Republican senators played during the last impeachment trial when they controlled the majority. But there's a new sheriff in town as it relates to what's going on in the Senate. And fairness is going to dictate the witnesses that I believe will be called in this trial. And that's a good thing for truth, for justice, and for the American people.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anderson.
Next breaking news on what?
A single freshman member of Congress from the state of Georgia, who is our greatest threat, our greatest enemy, who may indeed be weeks away from developing her own nuclear weapon. How did this happen? How did she get so dangerous? How did the rest of us get so afraid of her? Brett Hume joins us next to explain. Also, this is a surprise, Brett Favre joins us in just a little bit for an unexpected reason. We'll be right back.
America is along with your statin medication.
S250 all-wheel drive for
like Bolivia.
To get ahead of a likely surge and to do precisely what you were describing, which is to reduce the playing field. Is he right? And if not, why not?
Well, it isn't a question of right or wrong. What Michael is saying is that we need to vaccinate as many people as possible with the doses that we have. The science tells us, the clinical trials, the 30,000 people in the Moderna trial and the 44,000 people in the trial by Pfizer, that the optimum approach to get a really good response is 21 days after the first dose for Pfizer and 28 days after the first dose with Moderna, you should give a boost. We know that. What Michael was saying is that as you have limited amount of vaccine, just get as many people as possible with the first dose and don't worry about the second dose. The difficulty with that, even though you can say it makes some sense and not completely ignore it, there's a danger there. The danger is that the efficacy following a single dose is not as great as after the second dose. And if you have suboptimum efficacy, you could in fact paradoxically be selecting for more mutations. That's the danger there. So what we're doing right now is trying to get a predictable flow of doses out there so you could get as many people in the first dose, and then as the next shipment comes in, to make sure when the second dose is due, to give it the second dose to people at the same time as you have enough vaccine to go to the next level of giving more people first doses. So it's a question of taking a chance. You know, it isn't completely outlandish, but right now what we really do need to do, David, that would solve that and not require getting back and pulling away and saying only a single dose, is to ramp up the availability of vaccine doses, not only with Moderna and with Pfizer, but also with the new candidates that are coming online, like the Johnson & Johnson, like the Novavax, like the AZ and others. If we can get more vaccines into the mix, we could really essentially have it both ways. We can get many more people getting their first dose, but also have the capability of getting a second dose. And by the way, David, the J&J candidate only requires a single dose, as we know from the recent study. So there are ways around that. But again, what was proposed by Dr. Osterholm is not completely outlandish, but we think that we can accomplish the goal without doing that.
Just to finish.
Tax slayer. It's your refund. Go get it.
Eric Trump, he joins us tonight on Hannity, breaking down Biden's disastrous policies and how they are hurting you, the American people. Tune in tonight, Hannity. Yours.
Jason?
Global effort. I mean, it's obviously very important to be successful, and as you showed the curve, Chris, of the infections going down, hopefully we'll continue that downward trend, and hopefully as we get more and more people vaccinated, the level of infection in our own country will get lower and lower until it really is not a threat. But if we do that in a vacuum, without the rest of the world also suppressing the virus, it'll be a continual threat hanging over us. So it's very important that the rest of the world get vaccinated. That's why I was very pleased to see the result of the Russian study.
Another vaccine that is being used internationally but not in the U.S. as of yet is the AstraZeneca vaccine. That was a joint project with Oxford. There were some problems with the trial, but ultimately it did get approval in the UK. It is actually being administered in the UK. And I've seen some people, you know, respectable folks in the field, wondering if the U.S. is waiting too long on AstraZeneca, if the FDA schedule is too lax, if we should be pushing to get that out into the hands of Americans, even though, as you see there, 3 countries are not recommending it for seniors.
Well, that's right. You know, there is a little bit of a controversy about that. I think for the most part, the news is reasonably good. But we have a trial going on right now in our own country that we would like to see the data of that phase 3 trial, which is a solid, well-organized trial, so that we can make the proper decision about the safety and the efficacy and what place it will have among other vaccines. I mean, the good news is, Chris, that in addition to Moderna and Pfizer, we have the J&J, the Janssen one, where the trial came out and showed a good degree of efficacy, particularly in advanced disease. We have Novavax, which is another vaccine platform, which is a soluble protein that
has barely even voted. Why are they saying that? Maybe there's a reason. maybe you should think about what that reason is. Britt Hume is our senior political analyst here on Fox. He's watched this stuff for many, many years, and he joins us tonight. Britt, thanks so much for coming on. So I'm a little confused by this. This freshman member of Congress is now the kind of touchstone for the nation? It may be inflating her importance beyond what's warranted, I'm just guessing?
Yeah, I'll say, I mean, there is not the slightest evidence that she has any influence of any kind within the Republican caucus. Indeed, to the extent we know anything about what they all think of her, they're embarrassed by her because she says all kinds of really loony stuff. Contrast that, for example, with the rantings we've heard from, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Ilhan Omar, and others on the Democratic side of the House of Representatives. AOC most recently decided that Ted Cruz had attempted to murder her. That's pretty far out there, although I notice on Twitter there's some people who believe it's true, so who knows. But the fact is, if you're in the Republican Party, and you've got somebody who's way out there in your midst, you're going to hear a lot about that person, and you're going to be asked to account for her, and you're going to have her name and face thrown at you again and again by the media. That's the way the game is played in Washington.
But it's obvious. It's so obviously, because it's such a familiar tactic. It's a ploy, right? And yet they always fall for it. You see Liz Cheney or Adam Kinzinger, these sort of well-meaning but maybe not super sophisticated members of Congress rising to the bait every single time. What do they think's going to happen? Do they think this congresswoman's going to be the last person who gets singled out for group hate? They think it's not coming for them at some point? Like, what do they think?
Well, I think this particular Congresswoman, Tucker, is uniquely vulnerable to being accused of being loony. Right. And, it's, I guess, understandable that the members of Congress would not want to associate themselves with her or be associated with her. That's a function, I think, more than anything, though, of the media climate in Washington and, in the country, really, when you consider what the dominant media outlets do, like that silly piece you showed from the guy who wrote CNN. So, Republicans get asked about this stuff all the time, and you can't simply say, I have no comment forever. So you respond by saying you don't want anything to do with her, and everybody says Republicans distance themselves from loony member or whatever. That's just how the game is played, and you have to... Look, the truth is, this has been true for as long as I can remember, Tucker. Republicans operate in a media climate that is hostile to them, and you have a choice. You can rail against it, which many do, and sometimes, we in the media do, we in one part of the media. Or you can try to adjust to it. Republicans usually do a little of both, but sooner or later you have to deal with it. And this is just one of the things you have to deal with. And I think, I don't think Adam Kinzinger or Liz Cheney have been much embroiled in the Marjorie Taylor Greene case, but I think you're talking about Republicans who seem at times to side with the Democrats. That's another matter.
Yeah, I just think that every Republican lawmaker who wants to protect his voters should write on a card 3 words to respond with to reporters who ask about stuff like this. Buzz off, shill, because that's exactly what they are, shills.
Considerable amount of time to get them to be able to get the process in place to do it.
Is going to start, leading, educated, suburban voters who are reasonable, maybe conservative, but not extreme, and who are reality-based. They're going to continue to bleed those people. And it may well be too late, even if people stand up to Marjorie Taylor Greene, because there are so many people in the House who may not be quite as outspoken or bad in the sense that they say crazy things all the time, but they say crazy things some of the time. And 140 or so members of the House bought on to the president's big lie theory when
even
they
after
a brief.
Yeah, even after the insurrection. I mean, hey George, actually, if you could stay right there, we're just getting some news from Capitol Hill on this. CNN's Ryan Noble's at the Capitol now. Late word on the Congresswoman. Ryan, what's the word?
Yeah, that's right, Anderson. So we are told that the Republican House leader, Kevin McCarthy, has called members of the steering committee into a private meeting. Now, this is significant because the steering committee is the body that is responsible for deciding who sits on House committees, who represents the Republican Party at these House committees. Now, as far as we can tell, the meeting between McCarthy and Marjorie Taylor Greene is ongoing. We've seen both Greene and McCarthy come in and out of his office, go onto the House floor to cast votes, and then go back into behind closed doors to continue their conversation. But the fact that McCarthy would now take the step of bringing the steering committee into the room to join the conversation would indicate that there must be some movement as it relates to her future on these committees. Now, we don't know what is happening in this conversation right now. It is behind closed doors, and it is ongoing, but it is a significant development that the steering committee members have been brought into the conversation.
Brian, we'll keep checking with you. Brian Nobles, George Conway.
Dollars for her medical care. Thanks to the food, treats, and nutritional supplements, she is now happy, healthy, and in her new forever home.
Save a furry friend in need with Cuddly.
Looking out for you and your finances, and when you think about it, you might want to bring those thoughts with you in the polls. All right, joining us now, a preview of next week's charade. Our own Chad Program is with us. Chad, 45 senators say it's unconstitutional. Any chance that this could reverse itself and that there would be a conviction next week? I don't think so.
Probably not. And you know, this question about calling witnesses and maybe dragging this out, that could backfire a number of ways on Democrats. It would extend the trial, that's for sure. Keep in mind that Democrats want to hold former President Trump accountable, but they also want to pass a COVID relief bill. Extending this trial would tie up the floor. That means no Senate confirmations for cabinet-level officials. This is a problem for Chuck Schumer, the majority leader. He says there is no framework for the trial just yet. Listen.
The impeachment resolution on the trial, has been set back because the president keeps switching lawyers. And so, we have to negotiate. If we want to get it bipartisan, his lawyers are part of the deal.
For the impeachment trial last year, the Senate set up parameters. Once the impeachment managers and President Trump's defense team completed their arguments, senators posed written questions, and then the Senate conducted what we'll call a gateway vote. That vote was built into the organizational agreement for the trial. At that gateway, the Senate could have voted to hear from witnesses. The Senate rejected that. Already, the attorney for the QAnon shaman has indicated he would be willing to serve as a witness. Now, witnesses, if you're going to have witnesses in an impeachment trial, they have to be deposed. You have to have depositions off stage. That would probably consume weeks. The trial on the floor shuts down. This is why President Trump's supporters believe they could better defend the president, perhaps through witnesses. Sean?
All right, Chad, thank you. Now, we'll have more on this impeachment charade in a moment. But first, breaking tonight, according to another FoxNews.com story, the Biden administration just appointed an assistant attorney general with deep ties, we understand it, to Hunter Biden, who's been seen a lot at the White House in recent days. In fact, the acting AG was once a colleague of Hunter Biden's defense attorney. Now, remember, the president's son is currently facing a federal criminal investigation for international money laundering and tax evasion. This after years, as we have chronicled since January of 2018, of accepting millions and millions and millions of dollars, let's see, from Chinese nationals, shopping sprees, $3.5 million wire transfer, Russian oligarch, Ukrainian oligarch, money for cars, and other sketchy foreign nationals, on top of Burisma, on top of the Bank of China deal. Could you just imagine the hysteria from the mob, the media, and the big tech companies allowing all the stories in the world to pass through if this was one of President Trump's sons, Don Jr., Eric, or Barrett, or any of his daughters as well, Ivanka, Tiffany, goes on from there. Anyway, joining us now from the Trump Organization, Eric Trump. Sir, Harry, first interview, I think, since all this has gone on. You're watching this madness. You're also watching Joe Biden. Get your initial thoughts.
Listen, my initial thoughts are, Sean, just look at what he's accomplished in the last couple of days and how disastrous for our country it's been. It's cost thousands and thousands of jobs. Looking at XL Pipeline, right? Something that would have been amazing for this country, for the energy independence of this country. The only person happy about the cancellation of the XL Pipeline is Warren Buffett, because now all the fuel is going to go on his big trains across the country where it could have gone through a beautiful pipeline and helped this nation and kept gas prices down. Look at what they're doing with immigration, right? They canceled the wall. As Biden says, there's not going to be another inch of wall built in this country. Who does that benefit? That certainly doesn't benefit millions of Americans who are out of work. That doesn't benefit our population. That doesn't benefit a nation that's going through a pandemic, not knowing who's coming into the country. It doesn't benefit, the safety of our neighborhoods with cartels and certainly, bad people who smuggle drugs across a border. I mean, look at what this guy's doing. I mean, Paris Climate Agreement.
Jersey U.S. Senator Cory Booker eulogized Officer Sicknick on the Senate floor.
He was steadfast. He was courageous. He stood in the breach to protect the lives of the members of this body, their staffs, personnel. He faced down terrorist attackers and sacrificed himself, his own safety, his own security, and ultimately his life in the name of love, of countrymen and women. Officer Sicknick is the very definition of a hero, and he deserves to be remembered for the richness of his life, the way that he loved, the devotion that he gave this nation. That he is no longer with us today is a grievous tragedy, and it is also a crime. This great man was murdered. This crime demands the full attention of federal law enforcement officials and anyone who still harbors doubt about what happened here on January 6th should think of him. On January 6th, when extremists, when terrorists, when white supremacists attacked our nation's capital, they took the life of one of our officers. They spilled his blood. They took a son away from his parents. They took a sibling away from their brothers. They committed this treachery while waving flags, claiming solidarity, some of them with law enforcement. But it was hate, it was hate, it was hate. It brought terror to our capital and the death of one of our sons.
Joining us now.
Hi, I'm John Fiorentino, inventor of MoonPod, the most comfortable beanbag on the planet.
Senator Booker, it's really nice to have you here tonight. Thanks for taking time. I know it's a really solemn night.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rachel.
So, Officer Sicknick will lie in honor tonight at the Capitol. Can you talk a little bit about the rarity of that honor? What do you think it means in this context?
Look, it is something that does not happen. We are the United States of America. This is our capital. We have rarely seen in the history of our country people die here. We know the British attacked in the War of 1812, but beyond that, we have seen very little violence at our capital. This is a sacred place. But on a very dark day, a shameful day, when the attack was happening, he was one of those people who rushed to fight and defend the United States of America's most sacred spot, the capital of our country. And what has been moving to me is to talk to the other officers who knew him. They describe him as a leader, and perhaps more honorary, they describe him as a servant, that he was there for other officers, that he was a man of kindness and grace. And the pain with his family, I tell you this, it is the just thing that he is lying in honor, but we can do the family no justice. It is just that tonight and tomorrow people will pay their respects, but we can give that family no justice. Justice would be their son and their brother alive right now. And so I hope we as a country hurt right now. We put down our partisan posturing and just hurt. This is a sad and painful moment of remembrance of a person who gave their greatest devotion possible to the country they loved. He served it in the military. He served it as a police officer, and he died amidst an insurrection. And so for those of us who can't truly honor him, let us at least try to rise up and show through our actions some small measure of devotion relative to his, to somehow, through this darkness, find a way to bring light back to our country. And I just pray, and you're saying it, so much is going on. People are moving on the page. People are trying to turn it. But dear God, for his family, I hope that we make a much better effort at accountability and make a much better effort to show a love for this country and each other like he did.
It strikes me, too, just thinking about, reading about him today, preparing for tonight, thinking about the rarity of this honor, it strikes me that this is also, I mean, it's been less than a month, but it strikes me this is also the first moment as a country and as the Capitol, the community that works in the Capitol, the first moment to really mark the severity of what happened on January 6th. Obviously, there's the impeachment proceedings, there's a lot of legal proceedings, there's other forms of work on accountability that's happening, but in terms of noting the loss and the trauma and the violence that happened there, this is kind of the first quiet moment.
Yeah, well, what I appreciate about your reporting, Rachel, tonight is that you talked about the Capitol Police and what they have endured. And I want to include also the Washington, D.C. police. There are a lot of law enforcement who showed up and suffered as a result. But I'm grateful. We've had 2 suicides now of Capitol Police officers. When I talked to the officers, the morale, many of them felt like they stood in against extreme danger and then faced a lot of public scorn afterwards for decisions that were not made by rank and file officers, but perhaps by their leadership and decisions that were made much higher up. These are folks that love their job and they honor the space in which they work. And so I'm glad that you talked it. We lost Officer Sicknick. We lost 2 other officers to suicide, but the injuries of some will be lifetime scars and pain and adjustment. And then there is still a force here that is getting up every day. They've been running 14-hour shifts without days off here still, trying to protect us at a time that the threats of white supremacist attacks are at an extraordinary high moment. And this is a time where they are still grieving for the loss of their officers. A lot of attention is spent is paid to the 535 of us that make up the Senate and House. But this is a place that operates with thousands of people, but for the work of our government would not get done, whether it's Capitol Police officers, people who work in a Sergeant of Arms office, or parliamentarians, or who work in our cafeterias, or who work maintaining the grandeur of this place. All of them, many of them are still feeling the weight of what happened. Many of them were experiencing the fear and the trauma of being present when the attack happened. There's a bigger story here. There's a lot more pain, there's a lot more grief, and people are still experiencing trauma. And so I know that there is a lot of stuff that's capturing the headlines, but I hope that we don't forget the depth and the texture of all that happened. And I hope it informs us. I really do hope that we don't just move on as a country. I really hope it informs all of us and reminds us of the commitment we have to each other.
U.S. Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey, thank you so much for your time tonight, sir. It's a tough night, I know. Thanks for being here.
I appreciate you, Rachel, always. Thank you.
All right, we're going to take one quick break so that we can be back right in time to see the arrival of Officer Sicknick's family at the Capitol and the way this is going to lay out tonight. Stay with us tonight. We'll be right back with that live.
Ever better. It's when disruption hits your supply chain. And Ryder makes you ever ready with our logistics solutions that put goods closer to you and the people who use them. Ever flexible. With our e-commerce fulfillment network, you can reach your customers directly. Ever innovating, so you can manufacture new products and speed them to market with our transportation services. Ever seeing, with real-time visibility into the movement of all your goods from inbound to final delivery. Ever moving, Because your supply chain requires resilience, and your world never stops. At Ryder, ever better is not a tagline. It's our standard. Discover how Ryder Supply Chain Solutions can make you ever better.
Okay, Limo, you said it. And as I spike it, I'll tell them how Liberty Mutual customizes car insurance, so they only pay for what they need. Got it? Did you get that? Only pay for what you need.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Got my hair, got my head, got my brains, got my ears, got my heart, got my soul, got my mouth. Got my
Nicorette knows quitting smoking is hard. You get advice like, try hypnosis. Or quit cold turkey.
Kidding me?
Instead, start small with Nicorette, which can lead to something big. Start stopping with Nicorette. Last year, Subaru and our retailers donated 50 million meals to Feeding America. And yet, one in...
Cold chain takes a lot of, literally it takes cryogenic gloves. And so these things will happen. We just need to be transparent and we need to fix them.
I've been hearing about a lot of things happening. What was so shocking to me is that you guys didn't deny it. You know, we're coming out of this phase where everything was denied, everything is a lie. So I find it refreshing that you guys, at least I didn't have to chase you around about it. And if you can fix it, great. Because if you're having problems, I'm sure they'll be instructive to other people who are handling it. So my last question for you, Doc, is in terms of what you've learned about how complicated this is, because we look around, there are always different rates. No one can seem to get the supply. And it seems like state by state, there's always like a different story. What did you learn?
Well, the important thing here is that we actually do learn through the process and that we give the feedback so we can fix it. You know, one of the decisions that was made early was to allow all of the states and jurisdictions to have autonomy over, you know, how they want to determine eligibility. Well, you know, instead of having one stakeholder for Walgreens, now we have 66. There are 50 states, there are 16 jurisdictions considered, you know, the Washington, D.C., Puerto Rico, and now we have to work with 66 different stakeholders to make sure that we're doing the right thing. Now, that's not 66 times more difficult. That's some power of it.
I get it.
You know, look, what I would say here is simplicity will equal speed. We're trying to simplify.
Listen, I appreciate you being transparent. You have a platform here to make the case of what you're seeing that works and what needs to work better, because it's going to be vaccines versus variants. Dr. Kevin Ban, good luck at Walgreens, and thank you for being straight with us.
Thank you, Chris.
All right, be well. All right, this is the moment tonight, and we have to live it together. We see that we've had the vehicle drive up, and the family is coming with the remains. The officer was cremated, so they're bringing his remains so that the officer can be in a position of being memorialized and remembered for his sacrifice. You see officers there assembled on their bicycles. You see them lining as phalanx. Again, we haven't lived a moment like this together since 1988. That is when two officers were lost in the line of duty trying to stop a gunman from entering the Capitol. But it was nothing of this magnitude. This was no lone wolf, and that's why you're seeing it's being treated with the solemnity that this occasion deserves. There's several different phases to this, and I want you to see each one of them. Let's just listen and watch for a few moments. while we wait for the officer to gather the remains and the family and make their procession up into the Capitol, let's bring in Charles Ramsey and David Gregory to reflect on why we're doing this and why it matters. Chief and Commissioner, you've held so many positions in law enforcement. You know the force down here intimately well. Why does this matter so much tonight, and why does it demand this kind of attention?
Well, it's part of the healing. I mean, it means an awful lot to the family of Officer Sicknick, but it also means a lot to the men and women of the U.S. Capitol Police and police across the country, quite frankly. I mean, for an officer to lose their life in a line of duty, there is nothing that's more traumatic to a police agency than that. And of course, January 6th was something that all of us need to remember and not forget. And this officer died protecting the lives of our country, of our members of our Congress. And he should be paid this kind of tribute.
You know, David, I can't remember another time that something like this happened and there was such quiet on half of the political aisle, let alone when you add the fact that many of them were being protected by officers like Sicknick that day. And yet, this is the first time we've commemorated the occasion. There's very little discussion about why it was wrong and what must be learned from it. It's the first I can think that's being treated this way. You?
Well, I think there's certainly agreement about the solemnity of the night, of the occasion, and the sadness and the horror of the day. I think where it quickly devolves and descends is who's to blame, what's to blame, how do we hold those accountable? And you look at the backdrop of this Capitol where, you know, this occasion is a time to lift up someone who died in the line of duty. And yet the political overtures of the political duties kind of overtake it in a way that they can cheapen these moments. But as the commissioner just said, you know, it's a reminder too, I mean, we're living in an age where there's so much scrutiny of our police officers, and often that's appropriate. But what's also appropriate tonight is to celebrate police officers doing their job, protecting institutions like our United States Capitol, and in this case, Officer Sicknick losing his life in that process.
In the defense of the lawmakers themselves and the cradle of our democracy. Something unlike anything we've seen since 1812. You just saw the officers arm in arm with the Sicknick family, and now you see the officer carrying the remains of Officer Brian Sicknick, lost in the line of duty at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. You see that this is a very elaborate ceremony. There's so many officers there. The family was at the top of the stairs of the Capitol, arm in arm with other members of the Capitol Police, as Brian Sicknick's remains were removed from the hearse and walked up. Officers on either side of him, a flag folded behind, and now you see the detail coming out to escort him in where he will be revered and remembered as a fallen hero in the line of duty, protecting not just the cradle of our democracy, that would be more than enough, but our lawmakers who are inside its walls. And this is where the officers' remains will be, and people can come to remember, to think about what January 6th took from us and what should be learned from it. Let's bring in Congressmember Adam Kinzinger, Republican Illinois veteran. Always good to see you, Congressman.
You too.
Ordinarily, when we're commemorating and memorializing people who died in service to this country, I talked to you about your own service. You play a different role here now. You are being protected by this Capitol policeman. And I tell you, I have to apologize. I didn't hear you tell the story of your experience that day until recently. I should have thought to ask you about it. And it is really frightening, brother. I am sorry that you had to get to the point where you felt you had to arm yourself and think this may be it. After the events ended, what changed in you in terms of what you carry forward about that day?
Yeah, I mean, it was a day that, there was so much confusion, obviously, but a day that when you look back and the dust settles, you just wonder how we got here. I mean, you look at, the mess of the Capitol, the anger, the pure evil that was being yelled at, that was being shouted at these officers, And I recently talked to one of the officers there, and he just basically relayed the whole story of what it was like to me. And he happens to be a Metro PD, which is the DC police, and they rushed like 800 of them here, and they defended democracy as well. And he talked about just masses of humanity fighting against each other. He said it was basically medieval, but that they were in basically hand-to-hand combat. And you think about the sacrifice. Nobody went to work that day thinking it would end up like that. Democracy changed, but I think it's important to say that because of Officer Sicknick and the others, democracy held. I mean, we did our votes that night. Democracy held, and it's a wake-up call to just how fragile it could be.
It's interesting. While you're speaking, Congressman, I just want you to know what we're seeing. We just saw the congressional leadership enter. I saw Pelosi, I saw McCarthy, obviously the Speaker of the House and Minority Leader. I saw Steny Hoyer, another senior member of the Democratic ranks, Senator Schumer, obviously the Majority Leader now. And now here come the remains. Let's honor this with quiet as they present Officer Sicknick in the Capitol. the shot's going to come back of what's happening inside, and when it does, we'll bring it to you. Congressman, we were watching the solemnity of this and the leadership coming together to remember what was, and yet the reality outside these walls is a complete division. I've never seen an occasion like this, almost denied by half of the political membership, where they don't want to talk about January 6th, we should move on, who really knows what it was, it kind of gets complicated with impeachment. There's nothing complicated about this. There's nothing complicated about what's happening in your party right now. The shocking part is that you are among such a small number willing to take risk. I don't even understand why this is so risky for you to stand up and say, hey, I'm a Republican. I'm the party of Lincoln, not John Wilkes Booth. You know, QAnon is not for us. The people who went that day who thought they were helping us, we got to deny them loudly. We're not about them. Why is this a challenge for you?
You know, I think we've forgotten the art of leadership, or really how to lead, I guess. You know, leadership isn't always going and figuring out what the polls say and doing whatever we need to get elected. It's sometimes leading in dark moments. It's sometimes calling out things like QAnon, or saying that the idea of an election being stolen with widespread whatever is false. It's not real. And it's difficult to say that because you're going to have to take some immediate blowback. But this lesson from this that, you know, is a painful and tragic and costly lesson is, if you continue to not tell people the truth, they eventually believe totally off the wall things and will find themselves being motivated to go into, as an example, the United States Capitol. An officer is murdered. Close to 100 officers injured, and destroy the place and try to say it's the equivalent of what happened last summer or anything like that. It is so incumbent right now, Chris, on leaders to call out these dark, divisive conspiracies and just look with a sober eye and say, how did we get here and how do we get out of here? We have to do that.
I mean, did you ever think that it would be, as a member of Congress, where you'd have to pull your sidearm and think about defending your life against people coming to kill you for what you represent?
I never would have imagined having to do it here. And, you know, there was a period of about a half hour where, you know, I thought the whole place had been breached and, you know, that I was going to have to do that. Thankfully, the officers fought, some to the end of their life, took their own lives in the aftermath of this, but defended democracy and fought this mob and did so honorably, because democracy is not just worth defending for them. They found it worth, you know, Brian Sicknick found it worthy to give his life for, and we have people that sit around and are scared to give their career for the same cause. Like, look, I'm not sitting here saying everybody has to be a hero at all times, but something basic like just doing the right thing and telling your constituents the truth should be the really basic part of the job.
You know, I've been going light on the language about the war within the party. I call it an identity crisis because I can't believe there's a legitimate dispute. You know, Lindsey Graham on the Senate side and so many on the House side, they were tougher about Donald Trump in the primary than they're being about, you know, an open QAnon supporter. And you're putting together your own effort now to kind of reestablish principles. We hear that there's a meeting with McCarthy and maybe other people to talk about her fate. I mean, what do you think happens within the party with her and in general? I mean, we're in a split screen with the Capitol right now, and it seems to be an occasion that your party can't get away from fast enough.
Yeah, I know. I don't know what the future holds in terms of this. I know that I'm compelled to tell the truth and to say, you know, look, the Republican Party can be worth defending, and it is, but we have to remember where we came from, and we have to remember how to lead and be honest. We need a healthy Democratic Party and a healthy Republican Party. But where we're at now is not, this isn't just about winning the next election, because honestly, if we continue down this path, there is not even going to really be a next election because the whole thing's going to implode. So I think it's a wake-up call for some, and I hope there are some that are just, you know, being quiet that stand up soon. But it's about painting an optimistic vision, and for, you know, the base voter who they love their country and they believe that Donald Trump was that person to defend the country. I think we all just need to step back, look at what happened in the Capitol, look at the lies that were told, and say, you know, we can still hold to our principles. We deserve better truth and honesty to people, and it's easy to do. If you tell the truth, it's easy. You don't have to track your lies.
You know, you are not a big mouth. You're not a loud guy. You're not about histrionics. The only time I've seen you wide-eyed was when, after you guys, thank God, survived unscathed and you went back in and did your work that night, which I thought was so brave, a little reckless actually, but I was very impressed that you guys decided to do that so soon after this incursion. They didn't even know what was left behind. To see so many people stand up and say, I support the lie. I support the big lie. I don't want to certify the election. That's when I saw you get loud and proud about what was going on around you. How did you understand it then in the immediate aftermath of what you had to survive?
I was shocked. I mean, to go down there and see, people automatically or already say that this was, they know for a fact now that this was Antifa, and, to try to sweep this under the rug and still vote to decertify these election results and say that it's acceptable. I mean, that actually was a real delineating moment for me. The election and the lies about a stolen election was one thing, but then not learning this lesson after January 6th is really what's compelled me to speak out even stronger, because it's like, look, I mean, again, Brian Sicknick, this hero, gave his life for democracy. We have to be willing to at least make ourselves politically uncomfortable to tell people the truth, at least.
You think there's a chance that the party decides to be about progress and not do an Obama kind of opposition move that happened last time, in the middle of a pandemic at least? Do you think there's any chance, or you think the Democrats are going to have to go through reconciliation, go one way?
I think there's a chance, but I think it takes honest, real conversations. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing with the Country First movement. It's just being honest to people. Am I going to be overly hopeful that we're going to, wake up and see that? I don't know. But being a loyal opposition is a good thing. You can oppose stuff. It's jobs of political parties, but being loyal to your country above even any loyalty to your party is what we need to get back to. And then this democracy will be frustrating for some people, but it'll function and it'll work again.
I'm just hearing in my ear, Congressman, the president has left in a motorcade from the Capitol, from the White House. He's coming to the Capitol. We're awaiting his arrival. We will show it when he comes. It's important for him to be there tonight. And it's important for you to stand up for what you think is right. And just as a reflection of the times, it makes sense that somebody's going to primary you from a more, from an extreme part of the fringe that you had to expect, maybe anyway. But is there pressure within your own family about what you're doing right now?
My immediate family is great, but there are some cousins of my father that sent a certified letter, a handwritten 2-page certified letter, said I was in the Devil's Army, among a whole bunch of other stuff. And then they doubled down about a week or two ago with another certified letter reaffirming their belief. And this is the kind of thing, I laugh about it because it doesn't bother me. I've been doing this job and standing up for stuff for a while, but it's kind of indicative of what's happening in a lot of families. People that ascribe to QAnon or that take, politics higher than any bond with family. That's what we got to get away from. It's tough to survive that. And this is a human moment tonight. Brian Sicknick gave his life to defend democracy, and I'm not naive to think that this is going to be the biggest game changer, but I hope we take a moment to realize that, whether it's somebody in the military or a first responder or whoever, anywhere, that have stood up to defend. You're right to have an opinion, but we have to see the humanity in everybody now. And I think we've lost seeing the humanity on the other side, quote unquote, and that's a problem.
The Devil's Army, and them attacking the Capitol this way and what they were saying. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you defended the country from abroad and that I was able to, report on with the protection of men and women like you abroad. I've never seen anything like this in the mainstream in America. And my concern is, listening to the people at the intel agencies, as I know that you have much better access, they're really worried that these people, these extreme groups, have been entered into the mainstream bloodstream of our political dialogue and are radicalizing like never before online. I mean, I don't think that this is a one-off incident in terms of what's been opened up here.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about that too. And I think part of that is we have not been pushing back aggressively enough, early enough, openly enough. And so I do worry about what's happening, but I think that the more that people stand up and say something, I mean, look, if you're buying into this idea that the government's run by, pedophiles that have sworn an allegiance to Satan or by Satan himself, and we actually talk about that, and not in a way that ridicules maybe somebody that believes it, but just says, okay, let's think logically about this. The best way to disinfect, an infection is with sunlight and with openness, honesty, and optimism. And I think we need more of that. I think we just need more of respecting each other as people. Look, it's not going to magically happen tomorrow, But if we can just start to move that ship that way, we have a lot to be proud of in this country. We have a lot to be optimistic about.
100%.
Remember it.
100%. But boy, we should have gotten a little bit more of a wake-up call sooner than we have. I mean, look, we've known each other a while. I'm not a left-right guy. I'm a right and wrong guy. And I respect you standing up for what you believe is right when it's not even popular, although I got to say, it's shocking to me that it isn't. Adam Kinzinger, be safe. I'm assuming the holidays will be at your house this year, given the state of play in your own family. You and the family are welcome over at my house. Just bring a helmet.
All right, brother. Thanks.
God bless and be well. A little bit of levity so that we're not crying all the time. Because this...
Look, again, we have a one-party system in California. Anyone who wants to be a governor who's a Republican in this state is going to have a very tough time. I'm more interested in trying to find ways to fix our problems in California. Voter integrity is incredibly important. We do need to recall Gavin Newsom. That's obviously a different day. But in terms of long-term fixes, it's going to take many years.
I want to get on this because it was a tough time. It was a tough time to take on the intelligence community and declassify documents, and Rick Grinnell didn't shy away from that at all. It's my expectation that in a recall election, it would be a very different electorate in the state of California. A Republican could win, and Rick Grinnell could be that Republican.
I second the notion, but you're lucky because we're out of time, Rick. You've been saved literally by the music. But next time, we want an answer. I'm going to bring Matt back and you back, all right? All right. More Hannity after this.
In months.
Experience amazing at your Lexus dealer.
Investigators had forensic evidence that tied her.
Let not your heart be troubled. Tomorrow the great one, but Laura Ingraham takes it from here. Hi.
Thanks, Sean, and we honor the service of all of those in uniform,
Amen.
no matter where they're stationed, and sad day for his family and the country, but we move forward with, I hope, learning a lot from all of this, and I'm glad you talked about that at the end of your show. Fantastic show, Sean.
All right, Laura, have a great show.
All right, I'm Laura Ingraham. This is the Ingraham Angle from another busy Washington. While blue state governors tortured their states with destructive COVID policies, many of them saw a corresponding rise in violent crime as well. But one state leader has stood above the rest. South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem is here on why her leftist critics are still trying to take her down. Also tonight, we've warned you about a domestic spying operation under Biden. Well, wait till you hear what some so-called experts are pushing through a new New York Times article. Kim Strassel and Dinesh D'Souza unpack it. But first, China's useful idiots. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Now, sometimes the U.S. medical cartel lets the truth slip out. You know, they get comfortable when they're gabbing with their friends, like when Dr. Fauci appeared in his, millionth on-camera interview with David Ignatius.
When do you think, for us here in America, life's going to get back to something like normal? Is that September, November? Is it next year? What do
You cannot give a definite answer when you have so many moving parts. Because when you give a definitive time, then it doesn't work out. They say, the scientists were wrong. They gave us wrong information. It depends on so many factors.
Okay, I warned you about this months ago. Fauci is always shifting the goalposts. He's doing it again. Listen closely to what he said. No definitive answer. But we're supposed to spend $1.9 trillion? Then to do what exactly? Dr. Fauci says none of it matters. So many moving parts.
The honoring of Officer Brian Sicknick tonight has been reserved for members of the Capitol Police. Tomorrow morning, members of Congress will have an opportunity to honor Officer Sicknick. Brian Sicknick is the third Capitol Police officer to be given this honor of lying in honor in the Capitol Rotunda after being killed in the line of duty. In 1998, 2 Capitol Police officers were shot and killed by a lone gunman who rushed through the metal detector at the Capitol, shot Officer Jacob Chestnut in the head. Officer John Gibson was in a free fire exchange with the shooter. Officer Gibson was killed, and both of their caskets appeared in the Capitol Rotunda, where they were given this honor of lying in honor. And that's the scene in 1998 when Officer Gibson and Officer Chestnut were lying in honor. Officer Chestnut actually became the first black man in history whose casket was given a place of honor in the Capitol Rotunda. In the hour before Brian Sicknick's remains arrived at the Capitol tonight, the House of Representatives passed a new rule to protect the Capitol Police from, in this case, Republican members of the House who have actually attempted to bring guns into the House chamber after the invasion of the Capitol. House members who do not comply with metal detectors now in the House will be fined $5,000 for a first offense and $10,000 for the second offense. those fines will be deducted from their paychecks. In passing that new rule tonight, Speaker Nancy Pelosi said, "We all have a solemn responsibility to honor the service and sacrifice of the Capitol Police for the valor that they showed that harrowing day." Yet just days after the assault, many House Republicans began disrespecting our heroes by refusing to adhere to basic precautions keeping members of our congressional community safe, including by dodging metal detectors, physically pushing past police, and even attempting to bring firearms into the chamber. It is sad that we have been forced to move forward with a rule change imposing fines on those who refuse to abide by these protections. But the People's House must and will be safe so that we can honor our responsibility to do the people's work.
Greene. But a big investment he's talking about? China caused this virus. Let China pay to clean it up. But that would make too much sense and offend Gates' friends at the World Health Organization. The Microsoft founder is one of the WHO's biggest donors, second only to
door to the left of your screen at the top, right under the Capitol Hill and the time stamp here. And that's where the president will be entering. Again, members of the law enforcement are now entering and paying their respects. And, you know, we don't have control of this camera. This is a pool camera to get close-ups of exactly who's there. But, Chris, I want you to think about, as we await the arrival of the president and we watch these men and women in uniform pay their respects, what we've gone through, and watching at this particular place, right? We went through an insurrection. We went through impeachment, right? They're walking the article of impeachment over. We've had an inauguration, and now we have a fallen officer laying in honor at the Capitol. These are, as you say, as we always say, these are the times that people write about for the history books, and we are living in that time right now.
As long as it allows them to stay on TV, and as long as it gives the medical establishment unlimited power and resources. Again, the Great Reset. Now, Republicans and anyone with common sense must not allow this madness, this destructive insanity to continue.
Jonathan Alter, you have been covering events in Washington all of your life. This is the kind of event we never expect to be covering.
That's right. This was an assault on our democracy. Officer Sicknick died in action, a hero defending this country, our democracy, our seat of government, our freedom, our values, They were all on the line on January 6th. And so I hope that this is just the beginning of the commemoration of this man who made the ultimate sacrifice. And we need to create what historians call a usable past. We need to sanctify his sacrifice so that future generations understand the stakes and what he died for.
This is the rational, sensible way. We have a virus here that has a target audience, if you will, of high risk. It's not true that everyone's at high risk from this virus. It's not true that, for instance, children need to be locked out of in-person schools. You know, the data is in. It's been in for months, by the way. It's nothing new. And yet people just say the science, and they don't talk about the actual data or don't know the data. We have to get a grip here as a country.
Dr. Atlas, I'm going to interrupt you. You're very smart, but he knows the data. Okay, I don't buy that Fauci doesn't know the data. I mean, he's on TV a lot more than you. So I don't know when he's doing all this work, but apparently he's just working away constantly. But the idea that he doesn't know the data, I don't believe that for a second. He's made it clear now that we're not going back to normal. I think the exact same thing that I said in May continues to happen. The goalposts will always shift. Kids aren't going to go back to school if he has anything to say about it. I'm sorry. They're not going to force the kids to go back to school. Teachers aren't going to want to go back because, you know, Burkina Faso doesn't have full vaccines for everybody against the coronavirus. Or
person in American history to do so. I mean, he's in the company of Rosa Parks, and he is in the company of Reverend Billy Graham, and as you mentioned earlier, Don, two officers who similarly gave their lives to protect the Capitol back in 1998, Officer Jacob Chestnut and Detective John Gibson. And so this is an important moment in history, and it is a solemn moment and a reminder of just how rare it is to be seeing what we're seeing.
Dana, you covered the not only the people but the events inside of this building. As I said, you know, you covered them so well for quite some time. Let's think about it this way. He is returning to the very building that he protected for over a decade, where he received those life-threatening injuries, protecting the legislative branch, right? And I should say fatal injuries. For the last time, he is returning to the place that he served. That's powerful to think about.
Absolutely. It's incredibly powerful to think about. And it's powerful to watch. I mean, you could feel it. And as you know, as we discuss what we're seeing, the solemnity in there, it is really palpable. And you know, I've been in that rotunda when we've had people who were elected officials lying in state in a formal way, and you can feel it. But even more so for somebody who was not a household name, was not a president of the United States or a United States senator, but somebody who was literally in the line of duty and gave his life in order to protect, and not just to protect from so many of the threats that we think about when we walk those halls, and I certainly did after 9/11, for example, from international forces, but from within, from people inside the United States, American citizens, storming the Capitol while members of Congress were doing their constitutional duty in order to certify the Electoral College. And these people were doing so in the name of the President of the United States, forging ahead based on lies that he continued to tell, and those who are his supporters did as well. And that is...
There's a large spike in cases.
Cases, because cases are what matters. Not infectivity, not lethality, but cases. What they're not telling you, of course, is viruses run their course. They naturally peter out and they mutate to keep spreading, usually getting more transmissible and less lethal. It's a process.
Police officers and the others in attendance, they don't care about party. They don't care about petty politics. They are here to defend the seat of government and protect the only real, tangible monument to our democracy. This is a temple of democracy they were defending. And so this goes to the core of who we are as a nation. And in that sense, I think it is a moment of unity. The people who don't understand the importance of this, who don't understand Officer Sicknick's sacrifice, really should be on the margins of our society. And it's
vaccinate and treat high-risk people and let the rest of the population go on with life. And that's what ends the pandemic. If mutations come, the same principles apply. There will be some degree of immunity from the earlier infections and the vaccination, and whatever needs to be made up will be made up by treating or vaccinating again. And that's how we handle it. It's all a practical problem, and we have the solutions for it.
Yeah, and so locking down at this point does what? Does it prolong the pandemic? Does it treat hotspots or address hotspots? Because that's what you sense a lot of people still want to do.
Well, locking down doesn't serve any function other than prolonging and delaying what's going to happen eventually. And you might as well do the best you can. If you're overrunning your services that you need to save people's lives, then you have to deal with it. But if you're not doing that, then just treat everybody as best you can. We've got all these drugs now, and we know that work to treat people early. We should just be using them as we need them. Vaccines and drugs is it.
NAC, you have hydroxychloroquine, which of course got political and totally maligned. Ivermectin, vitamin D, zinc, all of it's good to take. On CNN, by the way, Dr. William Hazeltine made this stunning claim, Dr. Risch. Watch.
There's no reason at this point, with the information we have about variants, to think that immunity won't wane and that the viruses won't come back in a different form, just like flu. We live with flu, we contend with flu, with changing of vaccines. This is going to be a long, long battle, not a year-long battle, a decade.
cities, born thousands of years ago.
President Joe Biden and the First Lady Jill Biden paying their respects to Officer Brian D. Sicknick, who lost his life in the line of duty on January 6th, protecting the Capitol and the lives inside of that Capitol. Dana Bash here with me, Chris Cuomo with me as well. Chris, Dana is talking about the empathy of Joe Biden before the president came in to the Capitol. This president, also a very religious man, walking up to the table, putting his right hand on the table, and then over his heart, and then going over to look at some of the flowers and really shaking his head, and you could, a collective sigh, I'm sure, across the country of grief. In a moment that, quite frankly, made me tear up. I cannot believe where we are, but hopefully we will get beyond this point to a much better place, Chris.
You know, speaking with the president about his faith, he keeps it very simple. Obviously, he's a Christian and a Catholic, second to ever hold the office. But his faith in these matters comes down to two words: love, mercy. And it is a very ample instruction, no matter what you believe right now. We are honoring Officer Sicknick because of his dedication to something bigger than himself. And it is the highest ideal in our society and our democracy. And there's so much pain in the Capitol right now. Mm-hmm. There's so much pain in his family. There's so much pain in his brothers and sisters who did the job, who there but for the grace go they. And the shame of it is if we don't learn the lesson and don't honor the sacrifice by getting to a better place. And we have not done that since January 6th. And so for those who want to honor the officer, good, you should. But for those in power who say they want to do the same, we only know what they show in their intentions and their actions thereafter.
Yeah. Chris, thank you very much.
And it would have cost her at least twice as much as a
teammates on the Capitol Police. Tomorrow morning, there will be an opportunity for members of Congress to pay their respects to Officer Sicknick.
Fox News, free speech matters.
Don't miss Tucker Carlson Tonight, weeknights.
hot.
Have you mixed your paint?
And Laura, when Chicago police are stunned by the increase in violent crime, that alone is significant. In January, Chicago had 51 murders, the highest since 2017. And those numbers released by Chicago Police Department are conservative. The Chicago Sun-Times puts the number of killings at 54. And while the murder rate is always the most concerning, it's not the only violent crime on the rise. In January, Chicago had 144 carjackings. That means 2021 is now on pace to outdo the carjackings in 2020. And 2020...
Earlier about the grief that the president knows all too well. And we had not known exactly that he was going to be coming up to Capitol Hill tonight with the First Lady. We had an idea from White House officials, but this wasn't something that was on schedule until, of course, he left the White House earlier tonight and made his way up there to pay his respects. But we did know that in the days following the riot on Capitol Hill, President Biden actually had called the officers' family. That was at that point in time when the White House was delayed and lowered the flag, of course, when President Trump was still in office. And we know that the Vice President, Mike Pence, had later called, and then President Biden later called his family and spoke with them as well. And so we had an idea that this was something that could be happening. And then you saw, of course, other leaders that were also there, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi standing out on the steps as they were bringing in his remains in to lie in honor. And so it is notable, as Dana was saying, that this is a really rare distinction that you see someone get. And, of course, it's a rare circumstance and rare events that led to this event that's now happening, late in the evening here on Capitol Hill in Washington. And so White House officials have been planning this for a few days, we were told, and they just had not said so explicitly for obvious reasons, given the security of a presidential visit somewhere. But they did say that it was something that they believe was a priority after he had spoken with his family in the days after he was killed.
Caitlin, thank you very much. Caitlin, we appreciate your reporting. Dana Bash, thank you for joining me on this historic evening.
Following the evidence-based guidelines.
We know that the South Dakota governor, Kristi Noem, has been a horror.
It's not helping the people in her state who have literally been dying. While she spouts about personal responsibility.
Literally versus figuratively dying, apparently. Well, the pandemic is basically over in South Dakota. Look how far down cases have dropped after the peak in November. And the death rate remained below Cuomo's New York without any lockdowns at all. And like its viral caseload, South Dakota's unemployment rate has also fallen. It's now well below where it was before the pandemic. On top of that, South Dakota is a national leader in the distribution of the COVID vaccine. Governor Kristi Noem joins me now. I don't know what you have left to say after that, Governor, but they are so annoyed by you. Why is that, and why do you have a target on your back when it comes to the American media?
Laura, I really think it's about control. They have used for the last year fear to control people. And in South Dakota, we just took a very different path. We knew the science told us we couldn't stop the virus. We could slow it down and protect people who might be vulnerable and make sure we had enough hospital capacity to take care of those who would need it. But that we were going to do it together and allow people to be flexible to take care of their families and still put food on the table. So, that was a unique approach that for our people really worked well. We did have tragedies and we did have losses, but we also got through it better than virtually every other state. And I think the media hates that because it really is a testimony to what Republicans believe in, what conservatives believe in. We implemented what we always say we believe, and it showed that it really does work and bring more opportunities to families.
In its entirety earlier, one line in that statement was, "Our loss of Brian will leave a large hole in our hearts." I'm sure that is also true for so many people who worked there in the Capitol and either knew him by recognizing his face or knew him by name as they passed through various security checkpoints.
It's her job. She's the one who's supposed to make tough decisions, but she's offloading that responsibility onto ordinary people.
That reporter sounds quite young, good for her, but you're offloading personal responsibility, Governor? Is that what your constituents believe?
Yeah, Laura, I've never seen a video like that before. That was an outright hit piece, and it was hard to watch because it was full of lies. Really, the truth is that in this country, when a leader, such as a governor, oversteps their authority in a time of crisis, it breaks the foundation of this country. What is the next event that it's okay to do that in? What is the precedent that that is setting up into the future? And I was well aware of that throughout this last year while I was making decisions, that I knew what my authority was, and I didn't want to step over it, and I trusted my people. And overwhelmingly, they appreciated that. They appreciated the ability to get through this in a way that worked for them, their businesses, and our state, that really was an example to the nation.
And Governor Noem, Liz Cheney or someone like an Adam Kinzinger, I guess Mitt Romney, do you think the party's divided on ideology or even this impeachment farce of a trial next week?
Yeah, I think we're talking a lot about what we disagree on. And I gave a speech a couple of weeks ago about what Republicans need to do and why the American people are so angry with them. And it's because we don't follow through on the things that we say. We said we'd reform health care, we didn't. We said we'd fix immigration policy, and we didn't. And that is really what we need to do as Republicans, is start following through. And stop standing up giving speeches and attacking each other, but instead work together to really follow through and pursue American opportunity for the folks at home.
But isn't that what President Trump did, Governor? I mean, the America First agenda was wildly successful pre-COVID. Obviously, COVID threw a wrench into everything, but I'm basically focusing on this attempt to lurch back to the mid-2000s to a much more interventionist, open borders, pro-China trade type of governance versus an America First populist approach, which seemed to be really popular. So where's the divide?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, President Trump never forgot about the ordinary, hardworking American. He thought about them every single minute of every day and fought for them.
We'll start sending supply directly to pharmacists. Tell us how that is going to work, and what does that mean for the people who are at home watching us right now?
Well, that means a much easier access and availability of the vaccine to people in a common setting that they're used to. So maybe 2 or 3 things are going to be initiated with this program. You mentioned one that's very important, shipping vaccine doses directly to pharmacies so people can go to their pharmacies and get them easily the way you would get anything in a pharmacy.
America is streaming.
Go with me to the White House for the celebration. So they really are part of the family. I'm in the Senate Park building. I have one of the Capitol Hill posts, right outside the front door of Park. So I have a chance to talk, say thanks, and catch up with these officers on a regular basis. As you say, they're part of the family, and I am introducing a resolution, a strong bipartisan resolution. I hope it passes unanimously to commend and honor Officer Goodman for his quick thinking and courage, where he first, confronts the angry mob that broke into the Capitol, but then, as you explained, diverted them away from the doors of the Senate chamber, giving time to evacuate senators who were on the floor of the Senate and saving lives and preventing injury in the process. So as we mourn the loss of
.org.
If you're not
courage that.
Senator Chris Van Hollen, Professor Eddie Glaude, Jonathan Alter, thank you all for joining our discussion. We're going to take a quick break here. We will be right back.